OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, it is Wednesday morning. It's just gone 7:30. It's OTB AM. Nathan with you this morning. Johnny Ward in studio as well. Good morning, Johnny.
Good morning, Nathan. I don't know if we've ever actually done OTB AM together.
I don't think so. I was just thinking I haven't sat in the presenter seat of OTB AM in several years, and usually I'm very relaxed when I come in. Usually sort of feet up, somebody else's problem, all the bits and pieces you got to do. And then as this thing was playing, I was like, where do we go from here?
Well, you didn't sleep that well last night, you're telling me as well.
It's the pressure, isn't it? I just had a bad run of sleep over the past 3 or 4 nights.
Warm weather?
Warm weather didn't help. So last night I was like, I'm going to bed early. I'm going to bed 10:30. I'm going to get myself a good 7.5 hours sleep.
Didn't work.
Looked at my phone about 12:30. I'm like, oh my God, how was this? It was very warm last night, wasn't it?
It was very warm. It was strange. It was 25 degrees and it seemed to come out of nowhere, and it was kind of like a warm air when you walked outside. It was really weird weather, and I found that as well. If I'm doing OTB AM and you're saying I'm going to get up around 6, so I'll go to bed at, say if you go to bed at 9 or 10, just never fall asleep. So it's just the excitement of OTB AM
that's it. And also I had the window open because of the heat, so you can hear everything outside. And I keep hearing these cars going at 100 miles an hour.
Even in the leafy suburbs of Rathfarnham.
In the leafy suburbs. But I'm always wondering, I'm like, are these guys joyriding? And you hear all these roaring and shouting. Are they going to crash? Like, what's going to happen? My mind is racing.
Is it still racing for this morning's show?
I'm hyped.
Hashtag LOI in Europe and all that.
Absolutely. Where are you going tomorrow night?
Going to Tala, yeah, and it's great that we're in August and three teams are involved, and very hopeful that I think one team gets into the group stages and gives us a bit of fun. I think more to the point though, Nathan, watching the FAI Cup draw yesterday, like, just kind of get the feeling Go United might get a bit of luck this year. Here we go.
This is why I was pumped for this morning.
Like, since 1991, Go United have been to maybe 1 or 2 FAI Cup semi-finals in 30 odd years. You're thinking, like, statistically, you know, you've often a very good chance getting to the last 8, which is the case again this year. So you need one more game and you're into the last 4. And who knows? Derry City have drawn against Cork City. There's one other big game in the draw as well. Shamrock Rovers Drogheda, so they'll be gone.
Is it not written in the stars? When I saw the draw yesterday, all I could think is it's written in the stars, and it would be the best thing for the league. Duffers Shelbourne against Shamrock Rovers in the FAI Cup final.
Well, I mean, the man is absolute. Like, he was box office before he said a word about anything in the League of Ireland. Like, he's just week after week. Duffer is just producing these unbelievably good quotes.
Does he mean it?
I mean, the stuff about shells. I mean, it seems
he says all the right things, but he almost says
he may not mean them, but they're all the right things, whether they're actually genuine or not. I think though, as a manager, I feel a lot of it is the message that he's trying to relay, and the Shelbourne players buying into it and all that.
This is important.
What does he say about Sean Boyd? Like, you can tell that he's a great relationship with Sean Boyd. Sean Boyd, if you're not really into
Who's getting more bookings than sending goals.
The stain on his performance is that he gets booked again and he's going to miss 2 games. At the end of the day, he still has more bookings than goals. I'd say 9, possibly 10 of the bookings are absolutely ridiculous. Will he ever change on that? I don't know. But he still loves him, kind of. And you see the Shells lads, they're often not afraid to put up on social media that they socialise together. Duffer obviously thinks that this is good for team bonding. And they've really grown as the season has gone on. They're actually, you know, quietly, they're on the cusp of challenging for the top 4, which has kind of crept up. Because we'll have Jon Daly on. St. Pat's and Sligo Rovers had massive monumental screw-ups last weekend in the FAI Cup, which was a route to Europe that was logistically possible for them, as is the league, but it was definitely giving them another chance. And you're thinking, if John Russell got into that job and, you know, they hadn't done what they've done in Europe and they got knocked out of the Cup, he'd be immediately under pressure. Tim Clancy would be under pressure because they're doing okay in the league, and they'll admit themselves that they'd want to do better. Knocked out the Cup in the first hurdle at home to Waterford. Just so happens that they're doing okay in Europe, but it's been a mad few weeks in the League of Ireland.
Well, it's a screwed up calendar where really 2/3 of the season is almost in the first half of the season, and like, I'm looking at the fixtures last night, even for Rovers, and trying to book in nights for the kids and Tala and things, and you don't know when the games are going to be because they're just consistently been postponed because of the European matches. So are they going to have a big glut of fixtures at the end? Some teams are playing between European games, some aren't. And as you say, those FAI Cup games last night are thrown in the middle of the European matches. So understandably, Pats and Sligo have a focus elsewhere. But in terms of their longer term future, that game is maybe more important than the game, because you need to get back in again for next season.
Yeah. Now, okay, let's be honest. Like, at the same time, it's not like they were very likely to win the FAI Cup, either of them, whatever. Shamrock Rovers are the favourites, and then you've Dundalk and Derry or whatever. So, like, they need to look at the draw. But it was still, like, the FAI Cup, what that meant to Pats. I was at the game, obviously, last November, and I think there's been a follow-on from that with the Pats support this season, where a lot of people went to games regularly. Even Pats games, like, I comment on this, Nathan, a few times. I've been at games where they've been well beaten or beaten by local rivals. They lost 4-0 to Derry, and the crowd hasn't really been getting at their back at all. There's a good feeling around Inchicore this year, and obviously Sligo have had great success in the Cup and would love to be back there. What struck me though was looking at the league table there the other day. Drogheda have played 25 games. Drogheda's next game, there are only 10 games and they're done. Like, the league isn't there isn't actually that much left in the league, which seems a bit mad, because it's like, God, we're just coming out of July and the league almost seems like we're into the final stretch already. And I think I mentioned yesterday, the UCD rally has been really, really remarkable. Like, Andy Myler, they've been completely written off. When you think of Euro, Whelan and Kerrigan gone or injured, and they've overtaken Finn Harps. I met Ollie Horgan for the All-Ireland football final.
As a TV show on that.
Even by his standards, he was quite downbeat about Harps this season. But they've had challenges in terms of, he's brought in so many players from all over the place. Generally, that doesn't work. And it looked this season, I was at the Shells game when they won 3-0 in Tolkien. I was like, Ollie's pulled it off again. Hasn't worked out so far for them. And that's going to be an interesting scrap. And let's be honest, first division teams probably hope UCD finish second last. So I'm wondering if Galway United finish up in the playoffs. I wouldn't really mind necessarily if they played Harps the way Harps have been going this season, because they've been poor. They've won 2 of their 24 games.
OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Now, coming up on this morning's show, Johnny mentioned it, Jon Daly, the St. Patrick's Athletic Assistant Manager, is going to be joining us in about 15 minutes' time ahead of their trip to Bulgaria for the Conference League qualifier tomorrow night. David Connolly, the former Republic of Ireland international, he's going to be with us just after 8. We'll be looking ahead to the new Premier League season with David. We'll have a look at the sports pages, and we'll get the sports news with John Duggan after that. Then Samuel Luckhurst is going to chat Manchester United. There's been a whole lot going on around the club. Some feel it's been a good pre-season. Maybe it has been on the pitch, but off the pitch it seems a right mess at Old Trafford. And we have just over a month to go in the transfer window. The little banner on Sky Sports News told me 30 days. I couldn't quite believe it. 30 days of the transfer window still to go. Phil Egan's going to be with us with Deal or No Deal. And then Jonathan Wilson was brilliant on Off the Ball last night with his season preview. That's coming away from 9:30. You can get your comments in on the YouTube. Colin pointing out that I should get a fan in the bedroom. I don't allow listeners in my bedroom, Colin. Boom.
I like that. It's funny you say that, because I was in a house yesterday and I was like, Ireland is gonna, if you want to invest in anything, invest in air conditioning, or like basically anything to do with cooling houses in Europe and Ireland. Would you buy one of those fancy Dyson fans? I was thinking of buying one.
Are they noisy?
No.
See, they say they're not noisy.
Air purifying as well. Was something I was thinking of.
We're still at a what, 5 nights of summer where it's that little bit too hot. Those Dyson things cost a bloody fortune.
They are expensive, yeah. They are expensive, but I think they warm the room, cool the room, purify your air, purify your mind, maybe give you more sleep. Dyson.
Purify your mind. That's the greatest advertisement they've ever got.
It is. Irish summers are going to be. And the guy was in the gaffer yesterday, he was making the point that the houses are so well insulated now that they're actually not really at all. They're not at all built for warm weather in summer. That's going to be an issue going forward. So that's if you want to invest in something before we're all destroyed.
So Stephen Kenny was down in Tullamore yesterday. The summer soccer schools are on at the moment, so he did some media duties for the first time since the Nations League games. Not a huge amount in this in terms of news. Says he's looking to replace John Eustace as first team coach, hopes to have him in place before that Armenia game at the end of September. The international break this season is about 3-4 weeks later than usual, so I think there's going to be about 7 or 8 Premier League matches before those games, so we'll wait and see. He's pulled the rabbit from the hat several times at this stage when it comes to finding an assistant manager. Jurgen Klopp not happy with Stephen Kenny. Stephen Kenny a bit surprised by this. It's Stephen Kenny's job to worry about what Jurgen Klopp thinks. Stephen Kenny said he wouldn't have played Caoimhín Kelleher if they thought he was injured.
I thought what was interesting, like the Klopp thing is a complete sideshow. I thought what was interesting there was Kenny's always intriguing in these press conferences because he says things sometimes unprompted, sometimes out of context. But he made a point of how well Mark Travers was doing in training, where he said this guy's up to his levels here. And then we remember, Nathan, you and I had the debate about who'd be in goal, where I was like, Bazunas is definitely his number one. Well, yesterday he seemed to be quite clear, and we don't have a number one. And obviously, he does have three extremely good options in that regard. The stuff about Klopp I don't think is particularly relevant. It is unfortunate for Kelleher. I'm still not sure how good Caoimhín Kelleher is a goalie, because you just don't see him that much. Whereas with Bazunu, he's gotten a run of games. I think Kelleher could have done better for the free kick against Ukraine. Other than that, he's been very good for Ireland. But he does need a run of games.
Well, and Travers had that nightmare in Serbia, which he probably hasn't quite recovered the trust of Stephen Kenny as of yet. And my opinion on that debate hasn't changed really, in that let's see where we are in 3 months' time with Gavin Bazunu. Like, if Gavin Bazunu is Southampton's starting goalkeeper,
look at that save in the pre-season.
I don't think there's any question that Bazunu then will be number one. Because Caoimhín Kelleher's staying at Liverpool. I know when he was leaving Ireland camp, he was talking about having to have a conversation with Jurgen Klopp about his future, but obviously then the injury changed things. And again, you look at Liverpool and you look at Adrian's performance at the weekend. Like, Caoimhín Kelleher's now missed. Like, Alisson is, for a goalkeeper, it feels a little bit injury prone. You compare him to Ederson, who, like, we never saw Zach Stefan for Manchester City last season. Ederson always plays. Whereas, Kelleher gets a few opportunities over the course of a year. And maybe it is a case that you're just rotating. Like, if Alex McCarthy is Southampton's starting keeper at the end of September, and Bazunu hasn't played a game, Kelleher, in all likelihood, unless Alisson is injured, won't have played a game. Are you starting Travers?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I still feel he'd probably go with Bazunu. I think he's the best goalkeeper of the three, and I think Kenny probably feels that, or hopes that, he will have forced his way into the first team at that stage as well. It's an amazingly good problem to have. That the bounty in that area is genuinely astounding, and not only that, but just the age profile of these lads. We're absolutely sorted going forward. They can't all be injured together, surely not. And it's interesting to see. I don't know. I mean, the thing about Klopp was, I think it was much to do about nothing really. But it's interesting as well. His son Owen, I think that was brought up. He seems to be developing into quite a decent little footballer, and it'll be
he's in the Northern Ireland underage squad.
Yeah, I think he's mates that are involved with the Northern Ireland setup. But I feel we've moved on a bit now, that this isn't necessarily an issue anymore, have we? Where, I think there will be respect if Owen were to become a very good footballer. I think there'll be total respect as to which country he chooses, albeit that's probably a long way down the line.
He obviously touched on the various players and their moves and how positive it all is for Irish football. Aaron Connolly's name came up. So, Aaron Connolly at the start of Stephen Kenny's reign featured all of the time, and we thought he was going to be one of those players who'd be a mainstay over the next decade. He's gone on loan to Venezia, who were relegated, finished bottom of Serie A last season in Italy. So after a really disappointing loan spell at Middlesbrough and never quite kicking on at Brighton, he's 22 now, Aaron Connolly. Like, it's do or die, to put it mildly. And like, the conversation around Aaron Connolly is always an awkward one, because it's not really his footballing ability that seems to be the problem. It's an attitude thing, and it's very difficult to talk about because we're not on the training ground. We're not seeing. There's always a lot of rumours and people hear things. But there's clearly something a little bit off when his career has gone the way it has, and he just seems to need a gigantic kick up the ass.
Yeah, I was just looking back to see when the Spurs game was. Aaron Connolly scored twice in his first Premier League start for Brighton. The 19-year-old finding the back of the net either side of the first half in a 3-0 win, October 5th, 2019. So it's nearly 3 years ago, and the trajectory since then has just been so so disappointing for him. And you mentioned it's not his ability, Nathan, but like, he hasn't been performing on the pitch either. So it's not as if you can park whatever the stuff is off the pitch. We spoke about one gifted, if somewhat free-spirited and mercurial Galwegian yesterday. Obviously not me, but Shane Walsh. And Aaron Connolly is another guy that always people say Aaron's a bit different. We've seen on social media, he went off social media, what was it, 2000 and I think he went off, shut down his social media accounts last year after a torrent of abuse, and then he spoke about getting out of the circle of the English. I don't know what it is, the English circle, whatever he wants to escape from to go to Italy. Italy's a completely different culture, obviously, but to go to Serie B, I mean, this is do or die for him. This has to work out, and I don't know with Darren. I hope he's been well advised in his life, because I remember Shane Keegan speaking about when he was manager of Galway United, and Shane used to go to one of the hotels in Galway to do little bits of work, and there was a gym there, and Aaron Connolly would be flat out in the gym in the off season working on his fitness and putting in the hours, and that really came to fruition 3 years ago when he was bursting onto the scene. And those two goals against Spurs, that I think one of the things with that was I think Spurs were a bit of a mess at the time, and maybe that sort of inflated the impression. But it were two
you
good.
don't see Irish players doing things like that.
And the confidence of him. And you got to remember that, like Kenny referenced the Toulon tournament yesterday. I remember watching that, and Kenny was obviously early in the job, and Ireland had a very young team taking on some really good opposition. But Connolly was so dynamic at that time of his career, and he was really quick, really, would just have this ability to beat a man, cross the ball, do the right things, do the unpredictable. I think Kenny's early reign was tested by his loyalty to Connolly and his ability, or perceived ability, to use man management on Connolly and get him to become the player that he thought he was. And he didn't become that player. He was shipped at half time in the Azeri game. In some respects, I think that was... It wasn't the low point was obviously going 1-0 down in Andorra, but for the Kenny regime, I think that's where he gambled on the three young lads up front that day against the Azeris, and it didn't work out at all. And it was kind of like, I remember going into that game thinking, I think I was here, and I was like, Ireland will win this, and this is a brave, attacking formation, three dynamic kids of the future. It didn't work out, and part of the reason it didn't work out was because of the place that Aaron Connolly was in, and I'm not sure he's ever come out of that place really since.
No, well, you think of the trust that Stephen Kenny placed in him, like started him in Serbia, started him in Portugal, and so maybe there's a bit of luck involved in these things. Like both of those games, he's denied a stonewall penalty. And it seems his reputation doesn't help him there, because does he go down a little bit easily at times? But in both games, should have had a penalty.
You thought the one after he was kind of pushed after he connected with the ball?
I think so.
Yeah.
Like
you are right.
At home, it's probably a penalty kick, but you're right then. Like, it did sum up the problem for Ireland, is that after both those matches, there was a real buzz and a sense of actually Ireland are going somewhere, and the match straight afterwards, there's a real coming crashing back down to earth. And like been taken off at half time, he never recovered from that.
And certainly not an Irish perspective. You are right. Like that Portugal game, kind of. I mean, Aaron Connolly got into such dangerous positions, and like Pepe was all over the place, and you could tell they were afraid of Connolly, but you'd no faith in him actually scoring when he was through. And it was kind of like, it almost summed up where he was at. Like the ability was there, but mentally there was something not right about him, I thought, that night, where you just had no faith that he was going to score. And then, as you say, he was a little bit unlucky with kind of the decisions that were made as well. But he needs somebody to guide him in his life, because it'd be a bit tragic if his career were just to peter out now. And you'd worry for a guy like that. We might speak about like the vilification of people on social media, and I think Man United have 8 of the top 10 players in the Premier League, but it's not funny. And like, if Aaron Connolly's career derails, he's the guy who will go into the restaurant or the pub, and there will always be someone saying, that's Aaron Connolly. Do you remember the player that he was or could have been, and he's just basically an Egypt? Look at him now. Like, and I don't want that to happen to Aaron, because there's still time for him to turn it around, I think.
We've got 7 weeks for this conversation, but a message in asking, everybody fit, Johnny, what's your front three for Ireland?
Jesus, yeah.
It's sort of nailed on now. As nailed on as it can be, because we thought it was nailed on when Ida and Connolly were part of it. It's Parrott, Obafemi and Jason Knight playing just in behind.
Yeah, that would be mine. Yeah, I'd like to see what happens with that Amida as well, but I feel there's a dynamism there with Parrott and Obafemi. I'm not sure Parrott. I don't think he's the most inspiring debut for Preston at the weekend. I think this move again kind of does have to move for him in terms of where he's going in his career or what level he's going to find. I think he should definitely be good enough for the Championship, but you couldn't but be excited about they seem to have an innate understanding, the pair of them, that wasn't coached, you know. And I'm a massive fan of Jason Knight. I think he's going to be a terrific footballer, so intelligent. And
he needs to get a move though. Like he's playing right back in League One.
No.
Like, what the hell is going on?
No. It's funny though. Like we've spoken about the lack of Irish players in the Premier League. The Championship and League One are going to be so fun. Like if we're talking every Saturday about like these players.
Well, the great thing about the Championship is it never ends. Fun. It's not just every Saturday. Every time you turn on your TV, there's an Irish player playing in the Championship.
Yeah, and the spate of players gone to League One as well. So they would be the front three. What would be your back three, Nathan?
My back three. Youth. Well, Nathan Collins is the number one guaranteed starter. Like, am I? Again, a lot depends on what happens with Shane Duffy over the next few weeks. It's not enormous speculation, but it's hard to see him being a starter for Brighton. And does he sit around there, or does he try for a better loan move than Celtic, where maybe there's less emotion involved and he's fit and he can go and again go down to the Championship and play every week, where he'd probably be one of the best centre halves in the Championship. I don't know if we're quite at the Bamidele, Collins, O'Shea stage yet of the three of them starting. Bamidele is fit. Like, I'd still be reluctant to dump Duffy too quickly. Like, O'Shea feels, certainly what we saw at the back end of last season, still just coming back fully from his injury, but I wouldn't be surprised by the end of this season if we're looking at a O'Shea, Collins, Bamidele back three.
Could do with the left-footed player, but there doesn't look an obvious solution there, because I think you do play your best three, and they will be the best three. I think Bamidele is going to be a savage footballer.
Like,
I feel as well.
Is your back three? Is it Bamidele on the left, Collins in the middle, and Coleman on the right, with Doherty at right wing back?
Possibly, yeah. I think Seamus is probably going to struggle a bit going forward. But if he is playing, that's the position he'd be playing in. Left wing back is another position that is a little bit unclear, I think.
Well, Enda Stevens went off injured the last night, but Enda Stevens, when he's been fit, generally seems to be the main man. But McLean has been the best player in the position for Ireland over the last year.
I think he's been terrific. Joel Bagan as well. It'll be interesting to see what progress he makes, because he has goals in him and he does look an out and out left wing back. But I feel it's the formation that seems to probably suit us best at this stage. If we have an aggressive sort of 3-5-2 ish, and with those two up front, we're going to be good to watch.
Yeah, the midfield is like Cullen is probably number one name on the team sheet right now, because there's nobody who can really replace him in that position, and then it's who goes alongside him. If Hendrick is back playing, maybe it's Hendrick, maybe Malumbi has a good season. Like, the left wing back position is huge, because when Ireland play well, it's down to the wing back. So if Doherty is fit, like having Doherty on the right hand side, but you need somebody of somewhat similar stature on the left.
Ryan Manning, it's got to be, hasn't it? You're not a massive Manning fan.
I just don't think he's done it yet.
Nah, he
There's something about Galwegians. You can't be trusting. You can't be trusting. You put your faith in him.
I think
Johnny, some good news just before we get into that. We'll come back to it. I don't know if you've seen the reports in the paper today. Cullum Key says the story in the Independent. Shane Walsh doubts.
Yeah, I saw that.
Doubts.
I couldn't believe that, to be honest. I didn't think there was
to prove that he must satisfy the permanent residence criteria as set out in the official guide, and that clearly doesn't allow for higher education accommodation.
Need a reference from his landlord. We've all had them.
Well, that's like when I went to Galway to college. It didn't mean I was from Galway. I was still from Mayo.
Yeah. What do you make of it, actually?
I think if it wasn't Kilmacud Crokes, I don't think it would be an issue.
Yeah.
I have no problem at all with Shane Walsh deciding I can't make the commute. I'm shocked that more players haven't done this. When you look at the peak Mayo team, 7, 8, 9 of them were living in Dublin and travelling down consistently, and eventually, we saw Chris Barrett move right at the end of his career and not be travelling to Belmullet. I'm shocked more players don't do this. I think any backlash against Walsh is completely misplaced. I understand the frustrations in Kilclare and Clonberne. I still think it was outrageous, the things that were said about him, and the sort of, we're going to try and hold him hostage here, and we're not going to let him go.
I feel the same on that. I agree with you, yeah.
But I think it's Kilmacud and the fact that they are the superstars of Dublin, and then they're adding the second best player in the country right now, and you look at the other clubs in Dublin who have been training all winter, building up towards the county championship, and next thing, this guy's just parachuted in. Like, I saw Cahir O'Kane make a point that, like, maybe if you're playing intermediate in your home county, that's the level you should have to go to. I don't think that works, but for me, it's the Kilmacud angle that has put people out. But like, if Shane Walsh doesn't want to travel home, it's not like he's going to play for Dublin. He's going to play for Dublin.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe he should play for Dublin.
Yeah, I think Shane. I think Shane is a free spirit. He's his own thinker on things as well, and I think he's maybe if you were to say who's the one player in the Galway panel who might do this, I think you'd say, this was probably Shane Walsh. But I think I'd agree with you. I don't think Kern Clonberne covered themselves in glory. I think it wasn't fair in the player that statement at all. Shane has. I haven't been following his club career intimately at intermediate level. I presume he's given Kilkern Clonberne plenty of service and been an incredible asset to them. And I don't think it's really fair in a player who's also 29. It's not like he's given them a lot. That statement just didn't sit easy with me. And now, what happens if they turn it down, the GA, and say, no, you can't do this? So what? Does he go back to Kilkern Clonberne happy as Larry? I don't think he does now.
No. We'll bring you more on that on the news headlines a little bit later on. Now we're joined on the line by the St Patrick's Athletic Assistant Manager Jon Daly, ahead of Pat's Europa Conference League third qualifying round, first leg away to CSK Sofia tomorrow evening.
This is the man who knows all about controversial transfers, of course. We're not going to. Are we going to bring it up?
Well, he's on the line now.
I interviewed him last week and I never brought it up.
You never brought it up. He's right there. Jon, good morning.
Morning, how are you?
He's making the beautiful trip west. They're going to Knock Airport right now. He was thinking this is going to be a nice, relaxing interview, and now you want to get his thoughts on Rangers' shocking defeat last night.
Well, not quite. How are you getting on, Jon?
Not too bad. Just on the way across now. Just nice early start for us.
What happened at the weekend?
You just have to look at Sligo as well. It's just the difficulty of playing in Europe and then having to play on a Sunday. It's obviously disappointing. We knew Waterford would pose problems, and if we didn't defend right and we gave away silly goals, we would be punished. So obviously extremely disappointed, but we just need to try and put that to the back of our minds now and focus on tomorrow.
It is true though as well, because I think some people did fancy Wexford at least to give Sligo a good game because of the makeup of the fixtures and all that. What's it like as a coach, Jon, or to come from the high and the travel and all that last week in Slovenia entailed, to taking on a team that are in the first division, but yourself, like, this is a potential banana skin?
I would have hung up as well. It was an outrageous question to ask, Johnny.
Sounds like he's in Tirana more than Knock, really, isn't
Well, listen, someone grew up by, 5 miles from Knock Airport?
Never been to Knock Airport, actually.
What?
No.
Oh, my God. This is a disgrace for your...
One of Charlie's finest moments, of course, bring airports to the west.
You'll find it was Monsignor Horn.
Charlie was involved as well.
Second greatest horn to come out of Mayo, but
who was the first?
James Horn. James Horn.
Who's going to get the job?
Well, we should spend a good 10 minutes on this. The runners and riders, because the backroom teams are starting to come together. So obviously Kevin McStay comes in last week and has this sensational backroom team: Donny Buckley, Lee McHale. If Lee McHale is involved, I'm on board.
You like Lee McHale? Absolutely.
Lee McHale's my hero.
God, I still remember.
I put him on the Mayo Mount Rushmore.
I still remember
the best legs in showbiz.
1996, where Jim Carney wrote in the Tuam Herald, this game will be dictated by how Liam McHale plays. And of course the Mayo players changed their football boots at half time. It was a particularly charismatically wet day in Castlebar. Galway had won the Connolly Championship in a canter the year before. 1996 were probably expecting to win. I seem to recall my father going to the bookmakers in Glenamaddy, backing Galway at odds on to beat Mayo, and you had to pay tax on your bets in those days. And of course Mayo did the job, and was devastated after the game, thinking this is going to be a great year for Galway. Liam McHale was a hero that day. That's, God, how many years ago is that now, Nathan? 26 years ago.
That's depressing. That is depressing.
26 years ago.
Okay, Jon Daly is back, I think. The coverage on the way to Knock, it turns out, isn't great. I guess what Johnny's talking about there as well, like, was there a sense maybe in the dressing room before the game, or like that the high of Thursday was just going to be so hard to replicate that you can almost tell in the dressing room that this isn't going to be your day?
No, not at all. I think on the day, I think anyone that was at the game was seeing the chances that we created, and we obviously weren't clinical in front of goal, and we gave up poor opportunities for the goals we conceded. So that's football. If you don't take your chances and you give up poor chances, you're going to get punished. And we knew their front three were very good players and are very good players and can punish you should you give them opportunities. And I don't think we put it down to any feeling in the dressing room. We knew, obviously, the feeling of Thursday was fantastic. But straight after that game after the celebrations. Our focus is obviously on the game Sunday and to try and get prepared as well as we can for that. And as I said, unfortunately, we didn't defend in the manner that we have done for most of the season.
The performance itself last week, I don't know if you saw it, Nathan, but because it was obviously clashing the Sligo game. What was the heat like, John? Because Pats had 60% of possession the first half. I thought it was a phenomenal achievement going away from home against a team that you were expected to lose to.
Yeah, well, we emphasised the point of having to look after the ball out there with the heat and the way it was, and obviously trying to control the possession if we could. Obviously, that's difficult going to a place like Mura, who've obviously been in the group stages last year, beat Spurs in the group last year. So that they've had that experience of playing in Europe before. We had a lot of players that are still quite, in their infancy in their European careers, and it was very, very important that we got that across and that we needed to look after the ball. And I thought we'd done it really well. We had to run around to press the ball and held possession that can be really difficult. So we tried to look after the ball and keep it as much as we could and still try and create chances. And obviously on the night we had Big Joe was fantastic. He made some brilliant saves. But we did have our own opportunities within the game, and again, we need to get better at taking these opportunities when they present themselves.
Can you actually talk about that? Because Pats have gone from Vidiaros, right, who obviously was sensational, to Joey Anang, who could possibly even be better than him. Could you just sum up his performance, John, for people who didn't watch it?
Yeah, look, he was outstanding. He's been like that for most of the season for us. He's, I think not only his shot stopping and his saves and, coming across his commanding his box, it's with the ball at his feet as well. I think he's been outstanding with the ball at his feet and his range of passing. He has, when he catches the ball, he has the one, the sidewinder volley that he does to pick out players that are breaking away. And he obviously, I've heard a lot about Beat from last year. I haven't seen much of him. I heard he was excellent last year, but Joe, for me, has been fantastic.
Looking ahead to tomorrow night then, that template for Mora, I'm sure is one you want to replicate away against CSK Sofia, who, they're at the start of the season, they're level at the top of the league with Ludogorets, and you think back to Rovers at Ludogorets, it almost felt like they paid them too much respect, that Ludogorets were able to dominate possession. It looked like there was a big gulf in class in that first leg, and then actually they come to Tala and Rovers ripped them to pieces, are really unlucky not to pull off the comeback. It is away from home, being able to instill that confidence into players to play your own game, to control it, and I presume the confidence you can take from last week is huge.
Yeah, of course, you have to look at this game and try and look after the ball. As I said earlier on, it's going to be warm, it's going to be difficult conditions. There's going to be a decent crowd there. They've got a very good team. I think they've got 7 or 8 internationals in their squad, so it's going to be a tough ask. But we will go into the game with confidence and try and get a result. And I think the most important part is that we take it back next week, that we're still in the toy, that we give ourselves a chance to try and get through the round. We've obviously looked at them as much as we can. The last round they won 4-0 in their home game, 3 goals coming from set players. So we're going to have to defend our box well and make sure we don't give up any cheap goals. And then, as I said earlier, when we get chances, which we know we will, because they've given up chances in the games we've played all season, so we will get some chances in the game that we're going to have to be clinical with, and we're going to have to try and take to give ourselves a fighting chance.
It's interesting you say that. So you feel that they're defensively, there's a little bit there that for you to be hopeful about at least creating chances?
I think on the turnover, yeah, I think in the transitional moments of the game, I think they are quite expansive in how they play with the fullbacks pushing on. So they do leave themselves vulnerable to counter-attacks, and we have got good players in the team that can break the pace and can hurt them on that side of the game. So again, it's about our decision making and our execution. And we say it to the players all the time about that decision that you make and then trying to execute it in the right manner to give yourself the best opportunity to try and get an opportunity to score. So we do feel that we will get chances in the game, and as I said, we know we're going to have to defend well, especially away from home, first leg, to try and keep ourselves in with a fighting chance. And it just really comes down them moments that when we get them, can we punish them? Like we've been punished in games when we've given them opportunities.
We're speaking there, John, about the plethora of Irish. What would be your back three, actually, if you were to pick the Irish back three going forward? Because I'm going with OTBAM, Daly, O'Shea, and Collins. What would your three be if you were to pick a three?
Probably wouldn't be far away from that, to be honest. I think there's a good selection there, but I think I wouldn't be too far off that one, to be honest.
Well, the Pats centre backs, I thought Joe Redmond, you've made him captain. He's a young captain. I thought he was absolutely outstanding again last week, and Gravosty as well had some great moments. You look like you're building something there.
Yeah, they're a good age, and with the profile of the players that we've brought to the club, our goal is just trying to keep them as long as we can. And I know Joe has just signed a new long-term deal as well, which is great for himself and great for the club to have someone of his calibre at the club for the next couple of seasons, and it kind of gives you a platform to build on. We obviously started this season, we had to try and scour through all the players that were available with the turnover that they had, so it was difficult at the start, but we kind of feel like we're getting a squad together that is starting to, we can shape into it and mould into what the manager's looking for and how he sees the team playing. So yeah, it's for me, it's just about trying to get continuity with them. I think all the good teams that actually want to do stuff and win trophies and have that continuity and have that togetherness for a couple of seasons anyway. So we can keep the core of the group together now going forward, and hopefully we can build on it and try and get more experiences like we had last Thursday and hopefully going forward.
John, the line isn't great, so we'll let you go, but just before you do go, I guess number one aim is make sure the tie is still there for you heading back to Tala next week.
Yeah, I think so. That has to be the number one priority. Obviously, if we can take a chance or two on the night, then fantastic. But I think it's just about keeping ourselves defensively solid and making sure that we don't give away too much and don't give ourselves too much to do next week.
All right, John. Well, safe trip and very best of luck tomorrow night, and hopefully we get to check in next week.
Cheers, lads. Thank you.
All right, Jon Daly there is on his way to Knock Airport. They're Dublin Airport's screwed, isn't it? Yeah. They're going to Knock. Rovers had to go down to Shannon.
They had a great time in Shannon, by all accounts.
Treated very well.
Yeah. It's very weird when you're like a League of Ireland manager coming out with like what sounded like kind of vague propaganda for an airport, but the experiences of these regional airports. Knock, you're an advocate of Knock as an airport? Never been.
I've only been there a few times, but absolutely, like the joy when you get off the plane and being straight through and having your bag and been in your car within, I'd say, 10 minutes. Can't underestimate that. And
of course, it was near the side of the apparition as well, which gives you kind of a feeling of holiness and
as you're landing.
Yeah,
that's exactly
2 inches of sticky tape and all that.
Exactly. In terms of chances then, and the draws have been made for the next round as well, because you basically roll on week after week after week. As I say, CSK Sofia are in the same league as Ludogorets. They're joint top of the league. It's still hard to judge Ludogorets and what the gap was, because
I think they were very good. I honestly think
they were brilliant that first leg. But
yeah, I thought they were taking the pace a bit in Tala.
Well, I think that there was definitely a part of that, and I'd be interested to see Rovers tomorrow night, whether they have a slight change in style from what they learned from that second leg against Ludogorets, because they were so much more direct than they've been at times this season in the League of Ireland, where they can just control games and they can play it at their own pace, and we've touched on it a lot that it hasn't come alive too often, but they've just so much quality, they'll always win a game. Whereas actually putting a bit of pace in behind, getting Aaron Green running at them, knowing you've got Gaffney to come off the bench and Amaku to come off the bench, that actually not holding on to it as much in Europe at home seems to be the way to go.
Yeah, I just I spoke to Stephen Bradley after both games. I think he was giving out about he just think the travel really screwed them over in terms of Bulgaria, and that they weren't able to perform over there. I think both of these ties were misleading. I think Rovers were better than they showed in Bulgaria, where Ludogorets are a good side, you can clearly tell. And I think Ludogorets, it looked like they were on the night. It looked like they'd been out on the night out the night before in Tala. They were disgraced in the first half. Their discipline was terrible. They got a player sent off, but the key moments in the game for me was when Ludogorets had 10 men. They started to play and they were the better side. So I think Rovers were a bit flattered by that, but at the same time I think it gave them great confidence. one of the keys for me is Amaku scoring again. Like, he scored a crucial goal in Europe last year. It was a brilliant goal he got. Like,
but it was the quality of the goal. Because
such a lovely goal.
We sit here and we make pronouncements about what Irish football should be, and John Giles always says, if it's the right thing to do in the first minute, it's the right thing to do in the last minute. You don't put the big lad up front, you keep going. And I was in Tallaght just going, get it into the box, into the box. And the quality of the football,
beautiful build-up.
When times were desperate, they needed a goal quickly. It's the last minute of normal time, and to string together 10, 15 passes, the little step over and then the quality of the finish as well. It was as good a goal as I've seen from an Irish side in Europe in a long time.
It was a class goal, and I think Amaku, I think Bradley spoke about afterwards that he's had some sort of an issue this season where he's only sort of coming right now. I think maybe an injury or whatever it was anyway. But Amaku is a player I think we haven't seen the best of, and he gives them. Rovers have had this problem of a lack of pace, and I definitely called it wrong on Alan Manus, where I felt Manus was going to be an issue for them this season, because I thought he looked like he was on the way out last season. I think he may have had an injury. He's been outstanding this season at his age. He's been such a leader, and he's been so good in games. Made great saves. Ronan Finn has been outstanding for a lad who's hitting 35. Chris McCann, I feel, has been excellent in Europe, but they need more than that. They need pace. They need something to create problems for teams. That you could see it actually, Pats in Mora, like the players that have serious pace that could cause problems for teams. And Rovers don't have enough of that. Farouja's kind of coming back in now. He may have a role to play, but I definitely think Amaku will have a role to play in this tie. And let's be honest,
he's still very young. He was talking yesterday like he was still in school. He was doing his exams and he's trying to train. So he's got a clear focus now, actually, just on his football.
I think that's what it was. Like, he had other things in his mind or whatever. But Rovers now, I mean, whatever Bradzer will say about the European campaigns that they've had, where they've played well but not made the group stages. This is their chance. I mean, because they've 2 shots at it. They probably should be good enough to do it this time. But even if they don't, they've a very, very good chance against the Kosovan or Faroe champions if they don't.
All right, lots more to come on that over the next couple of days. Now, Off the Ball is heading back to Vicar Street. It's going to be our biggest roadshow of the year. It's in association with Cabri FC, and it's coming away on August 17th. Michael Owen, Ian Wright, Emma Byrne and Karen Carney are going to be the guests on a star-studded night. There'll be some brilliant stories and lots of reminiscing about their great careers and looking ahead to the new season as well. It's an exclusive off-air event. Tickets go on sale this week. I think they're going on sale tomorrow morning at 9 a.m, but we'll confirm that a little bit later. But you can keep an eye on our social channels. We'll let you know all about that. You will not miss this. And a reminder that all the ticket proceeds as well are going to go towards supporting Irish women's grassroots football. Terms and conditions apply, so we hope to see you there on the night. Now, during the ad break, you're going to hear a clip from the latest episode of the Football Pod, where Tommy, Paddy and James talk about Paddy Clifford's dedication to the Kerry cause. You can catch the full latest episode of this award-nominated podcast, as I'm legally obliged to say now. Didn't get nominated for the
award-nominated. Yeah.
You didn't get nominated? The podcast didn't get nominated? No.
I don't think we actually entered.
Oh, yeah, that old, yeah.
We're too big for that stuff.
Yeah, you can get the full Football Pod, where they're giving out their awards as well. It's on the OTB Podcast Network and all our social channels. After the break, we're going to be previewing the new season with David Connolly.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Football Pod with Paddy Andrews and James O'Donoghue.
I heard through the grapevine that Paddy Andrews was happy enough that Sean O'Shea had put the ball in the net.
Was?
He did. He goes, leave him kick that.
Leave him. 100%. I admit that. I was thinking, not within the conditions, the time of the game. He's nearly 60 metres out. And I'm just thinking that he's not kicking that. But there's the little bit you're going, he might.
Subscribe to the Football Pod on the OTB Sports app now.
With Paddy, think about his career journey. He wasn't even selected for Kerry before he was 24. Everyone in the county kind of thought Paddy should be on that panel. He wasn't. Next thing, just dedicated himself, did all the sacrifices without being on the panel. And when he came in, then he was ready.
Was he ready to be an inter-county footballer when he came in?
He was excellent for the juniors. He came in ready to play. Attitude unbelievable. Gym, training, straight into the team. Hasn't looked back since. Surely get a second All-Star.
That's nearly unheard of, though, isn't it? This level, given the conditioning the players have at the moment, to be coming in at that age, straight into an inter-county setup, is it?
It is, but like the training he was doing, I don't know.
What do you mean, like?
like physically, he was an intercounty player, even ahead of intercounty players, I say, physically, in terms of the training he was doing, the fitness-wise, the weights he was doing. And then, like, he was keeping his skills. He was still playing with the club. His skills were exceptional. His natural skill, and just came in and took off.
Yeah.
You know,
Nice.
yeah, you have to hold your hands up and say fair play for that. Because a lot of fellas, when you're 24, haven't made it. All your buddies are out going holidays, interrailing, Australia.
That is.
You're 24.
That is a big ask.
So easy to pack it in there. And it showed the faith. Yeah.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, you're welcome back. The Premier League is back this weekend, and we're delighted to announce that Off the Ball has agreed a new 3-year deal for live and exclusive Premier League commentaries every Sunday of the Premier League. Starting this Sunday, we will have a double header at 2 o'clock. We're going to bring you Manchester United against Brighton. Myself and Brian Kerr will be covering that one. And then it's West Ham against the champions Manchester City. Kenny Cunningham alongside Stephen Doyle to look ahead to the new season. We're joined by the former Republic of Ireland striker David Connolly. Good morning, David.
Good morning, lads. How are you?
Very well. We're going to talk about our title winner, top 4, bottom 3, players to watch, all that usual sort of stuff. How much of all your predictions hang on Erling Haaland?
I'm dreadful at predictions, but look, you would imagine he's going to score an absolute bundle full of goals. And if you say anything different, you'd be crazy. However, there was a couple of signs, I guess, in the Community Shield where maybe, you got to remember you're playing with the player with the best brain, arguably, in the Premier League, in Kevin De Bruyne. And maybe a couple of times he didn't quite make the run that De Bruyne was looking for. So it'll take time, I think, for them to gel. But nonetheless, you'd imagine he's going to be, the runaway leader in it, because they create so many chances. He'll be the top scorer. I'll be amazed if he isn't.
Wow. I'm not sure about that.
Wow. Really? I think City just create so much. I think he'll be the top scorer.
The strange dynamic with City is how many goals can you score, and how many more important goals can you score? So last season they scored 99, the year before 83, the year before 102. Like, they've always scored an enormous amount of goals.
Yeah.
So I guess it's in terms of the difference his goals will make, and will they take away from goals elsewhere around the pitch?
Look, put it like this, lads, right? The amount of times I would work on games with Man City, and he'd have, he played Phil Foden as a 9 v Brighton. He played Jack Grealish as a 9 against Watford, right? None of them worked. He played Jesus as a winger. Never played him down through the middle. I mean, he's an out-and-out goal scorer. I know it's only pre-season, but obviously he's banging the goals in for Arsenal. My point being, you put a centre-forward in that team, and last season, I think, was the first time someone got into 20 for them. You go to season before, I think it was only Gundogan that got in the double figures. The goals were spread around the pitch. That's only because they had to be spread around the pitch.
Is that not the Guardiola way, that actually he wants that patient style of football that may frustrate? Because the problem with the Community Shield is everyone's reading so much into one game, and like, there was the De Bruyne getting frustrated with Haaland not making the run, there was Haaland getting frustrated with De Bruyne and not picking out when he did make the run. That City are so used to being patient, to holding on to it, whereas Haaland, it may actually suit him to be the centre of everything and to go through him quickly. And like, is that not a big change in style for City?
No, because I think they can play a couple of different ways. Don't get me wrong. I mean, teams traditionally will sit in against them, and then you got to break them down. But I mean, the delivery they get from wide, the quality through the middle of the pitch, able to hit balls long. I'll be amazed if he's not top scorer.
He's 11-4 actually. I was just looking at it. Salah has been usurped as favourite for the first time in a few years. Would you have any concerns about Salah this season in terms of him being the player that?
No, I think Salah, there seems to be concerns about him ahead of every season, and I think he is still one of the most underestimated players there's been in the Premier League.
Which is mad, yeah.
He was by far and away the best player on the pitch in the Community Shield the weekend. Like, his touch was consistently unbelievable.
I think he tailed off a bit last season, David. My problem with Salah is that he plays so much that he does need a break, and in fairness, he has had that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, look, they don't have the African Cup of Nations this year, so that's one thing.
And he's not going to the World Cup.
Yeah.
He's not going to the World Cup, exactly. Now, if you go back to his form after the Africa Cup of Nations, he played 4 games, all went to extra time. He looked absolutely dead on his feet, missed a pen. A contrast with Sadio Mane, who obviously came out the African Cup of Nations on a high, and he just flew after Christmas. And ironically, I think it's Jurgen Klopp's loyalty. I looked at this. Why did Mane leave? And the amount of times that Klopp had to make a change or wanted to make a change in the striking department, and it would be Mane the one to come off. I think in the end, Mane just got fed up with that because of Klopp's loyalty to Salah. So I think he wanted to go and be the main man. Like, I'm the one that always stays on, which he'll get at Bayern Munich, which Jurgen just had Salah. So he very, very rarely came off. And the amount of times they would score late goals, Liverpool, and Mane wouldn't be there, certainly in the first little part of the season. So, I think Mo will still score goals. I think he's an ultimate pro. I mean, he's built for football, very durable. He'll always be fit. He's never injured. He'll be up there challenging, of course.
Can we have a seasonal match bet of a steak meal that Salah gets more goals than Haaland?
Do you know what? I'd love him to, but I have a feeling I'm going to go with. You might be right. I mean, because Salah.
Hedging his steak meal here.
Well, I think you see David understands that he eats his steak in a better restaurant than you do.
I'm not sure about that.
maybe a Happy Meal somewhere, just in case. I'm not that confident.
It'll always be a Happy Meal.
City have they've made in a way quite radical changes with Haaland coming in, letting Raheem Sterling go to one of their rivals, Gabriel Jesus going to another strong Premier League side. They've also brought in Calvin Phillips. It'll be interesting to see how that works. Is it a one in, one out with himself and Rodri every second week, or can they play together? It doesn't look as though they're going to sign Cucurella at this stage, that he's going to go to Chelsea. Are City stronger heading into this season than they were at the end of last season?
I think it's a good question. I mean, what I would say is, I wonder how happy the players are there. Because I said this last season, but, he didn't even know, the manager, that Fernandinho was going. Fernandinho didn't even tell him until he said it in a press conference, which, imagine that, you're I think he was club captain, right?
Yeah, he was, yeah.
Yeah, imagine that, you're club captain, not telling your manager, which to me spoke volumes. Jesus couldn't wait to leave and go and play. Jack Grealish looks, half the player that he was, because he's never played wide. I mean, and when he has, he lasts 60 minutes. So I don't know. I don't know if they are stronger. I think the addition of Calvin Phillips is a superb one, especially for the money. But I think they are stronger in essence. Haaland coming in, Calvin Phillips coming in. I think they are stronger. But it just shows you, I guess, maybe some clubs might have kept hold of Raheem and been even stronger. But it just seemed like Pep, I don't know. He has that way. I think he can lose players by the looks of it, and they can kind of.
That's true as well,
to move on a little bit.
Well, there's the intensity. Listen, to both these managers, the intensity and the pressure they put on you every single week, that the success they've had. Maybe some players.
I think Liverpool seems more enjoyable though.
Absolutely.
I think I definitely got the feeling, David, that Sterling, I'm not sure he was overly happy there for some time. The Aguero comments are interesting in the back of the paper.
Aguero's been talking about Erling Haaland, saying he had a bit of a rude awakening. He was too used to Germany. Haaland thought he was alone. Then Van Dijk arrived and said, "Welcome to the Premier League." Which is interesting coming from Sergio Aguero. And again, it's not a done deal with Erling Haaland, and we don't want to get into the quality of the Bundesliga, but he was the big dog there, and he's also not going to go up against defenders of the quality of Virgil van Dijk every week. But it's in the games against defenders of the quality of Van Dijk, they're going to need him, because City, we know, batter most teams. They'll score goals against most teams. So is he going to be clinical in those matches? You have to assume he is. I'm with you, David. If he stays fit, he scores 25 goals this season.
Well, look, put it like this. I mean, it's not as if he's only just wanted a central striker. Last season, he tried to get Harry Kane, and he didn't. So, for him, they've been amazing. They've made do without a central striker, to be honest, for 2 seasons. So, but it is one where we've seen an awful lot of Erling, scoring great goals and bullying people and getting in behind, etc. Pep demands an awful lot of his players. His coaching on the side is non-stop. I mean, the times I've seen Jack Grealish and the like be berated by him in terms of he's not playing that role the way he wants, and he's pretty ruthless, he'll take him off. Whether he's a strikers coach, I don't know, because, he'll take you off after 60 minutes and you think, whereas I think Jurgen Klopp got it right with Núñez, starting him as sub, coming on in the Community Shield, because if he'd have started, he would have come off. And then if you start and come off, he'll be called a failure, And you look at the amount of times clubs sign strikers. I've been a striker myself. The best way sometimes to get a goal is often coming off the bench, and then you're integrated gradually. I mean, now the weight has lifted. I thought that was really good management from Jurgen.
You didn't want to start those games, David.
Better off the bench, boss. Yeah, there's something in that, right? Because if you'd have started that,
pressure.
You're looking over your shoulder.
Yeah, and people pre-season saying his touch was terrible, looking at video clips and all this sort of stuff. But before you know it, instead he comes off the bench, spaces are a bit bigger, he's involved in a couple of goals late on, and bang, he's hit the ground running a little bit.
What's your front three for Liverpool, actually?
Well, if it was me, I think Luis has to play. I love Jota, and I love Salah, and I reckon that would be my three.
There's so many options now. Like, they've so many options, and one of the question marks over Liverpool is like Mane going, and like the debate around the front three has been interesting with Liverpool for years. That's why I often feel Salah's been underestimated. Firmino always got this huge credit. He's the one who links everything together, and like Salah and Mane is the one who provides the energy and that real fight and sets the tempo of that high press. And now Mane is gone, but like they've got the replacement already. In Diaz. Like, Diaz was one of the best players in the league. Now, I know he was very quiet in the Champions League final, but like in the last 3-4 months, he was exceptional and seems to have that little bit of bite and nastiness in him as well, and the work rate. A lot depends on Núñez. Like, Jota faded a bit, it seemed, when Diaz arrived in, and the goals weren't quite as plentiful. He's coming into the season with an injury. Like, there is an opportunity there for Darwin Núñez, if he can start quickly, that it's quite straightforward for Jurgen Klopp again, that it's that front three. There's so many games, it's such a crowded calendar, like everyone will get a chance, but that maybe that becomes the new front three for Liverpool quite quickly.
Well, I think there's not a little bit of disservice, but that number 9 role, whether it's Firmino, who, is just incredible with the ball at his feet, but obviously we know he doesn't maybe score the goals, whereas Jota, when he came in, he was absolutely sensational. He was sensational. All sorts of finishes and goals, ruthless as that central striker. And when I mentioned Luis earlier, that's obviously Luis Diaz. He was kept a little bit quiet in the cup final. He was kept a little bit quiet. He faded a little bit in that game, but I think second season around he'll be even better. So for me, Jota gets the starting role. And
Núñez is the David Connolly of the team then?
Well, I
think the bench.
I think he has to. I think it's sensible to integrate him like that, because, he just signed a new deal, Jota. He'll get plenty of games this season. As you say, they all will. But for me, first choice front three, Jota's in it alongside Salah and Luis Diaz.
Right. I think, just finishing on City, I think that Grealish future is so interesting because if Haaland plays as the 9, Mahrez is the main option on the right. Now, maybe he can play one of Foden or Grealish on the right-hand side, but if Foden and Grealish are fighting it out for one spot on that left-hand side, Foden's going to win that battle every day of the week, David.
Yeah, he will.
Could you see him? Could you see him playing Grealish a bit deeper this season?
I don't think so. My worry for Jack is where exactly he will get into the team. I mean, I think it is a concern for him, because I think he's tried to shoehorn him into the team at times last season, and it didn't quite work. So if you're looking at City's first choice 11, would he get in it? I'm not sure.
Who's winning the league then?
City. I think they will. I think they will, but I think Liverpool will run them close.
A lot of people feel that Tottenham are the team that can run the two of them closest if it turns out that the loss of Mane and Haaland coming in completely unsettles thing, and there's an opportunity that, you know, Tottenham have added incredible depth. I was trying to do my fantasy football team yesterday, Johnny, and I was looking at the Spurs squad, and they've got about 18 defenders, it turns out now. Huge depth. I still sort of feel that we're 4 games away from Conte having a complete meltdown, and it all just breaking up at Tottenham as the way it generally seems to. But when you look at Tottenham compared to where Chelsea are, and things can change over the next 30 days of the transfer window with Chelsea, what's happening at Manchester United, and even with the arrival of Jesus at Arsenal, is Tottenham the pick of those 4?
Well, I think if you look at the manager, you know, and the impact he had, and he's going to have even longer now, like from the get-go. The way they ended the season is well, you know, smashing. I know, obviously, Norwich, but nonetheless, you know, smashing Norwich. Son in form, Kane. I mean, they look very, very strong. The only thing I'd say is I saw them a couple of times last season live, and you know, they struggled at times in the wing-back areas. I mean, you know, Doherty, I think, is like, if it was me, I'd be playing him right wing-back rather than Emerson Royale. At times, I'm not sure on both Spurs wing-backs compared to, say, Chelsea's wing-backs, you know. But I think when you have the players they've got, I think Bentancur is excellent, you know, Son, Kane. I mean, they've got real quality and they added to it. But I just don't know if their wing-backs are as good as other teams, you know, your Chelseas of this world, for example, or the full-backs of Liverpool. That it's only when you watch them live a little bit, you see where they fall down at times. So we'll have to wait and see.
What of the others then? Chelsea are the hardest, it feels, to figure out at the moment, because like they've obviously brought in Raheem Sterling, and he seems to have been a real target for Thomas Tuchel. Even in the last 24-48 hours, they've been linked with 4 or 5 other players that could completely change the way we look at them, and there might be some outgoings. Timo Werner's been strongly linked with a move away. Romelu Lukaku is gone. Like, this time last year we felt Chelsea were, you know, in a real position, prime to challenge for the title. Have they dropped off that much?
Well, I think certainly their form at the end, you would say they have a little bit. I mean, they lost Koundé, which they might have wanted really that one to go through. I think Koulibaly's a good signing. I think Raheem will score lots and lots of goals. But I don't know if they've totally solved that central striker. I don't know what Johnny thinks, but I don't really think they have. You know, last season at times it looked like a bit like Man City. Really, they were often struggling to find that central striker, or who would play that central striker, or who would get them goals. You know, we all know Werner's quick; he runs in behind, but misses a lot of chances. Yeah. You know, I'm not quite sure they've solved that.
What's their ambition this season? It's kind of, you know, you imagine at best sort of 4th. Would it be at best 3rd?
I wonder. Like, if
I think Arsenal will be
like signing
much better this season.
Signing Sterling, you know, gives them I still think Sterling's again a player who maybe doesn't get the respect he deserves.
Yeah,
he's been exceptionally good, and I was surprised that City would still let him go to Chelsea. I think their ambitions are still quite high for Chelsea this season. Now, they're in a position where we thought in February, like, will this club exist come the start of this season, to Thomas Tuchel moaning about not being given the money that he should have been given. And it does look as though like they've a lot to do. Like, they've lost centre-backs, they want to bring in more centre-backs, they want to bring in full new set of wing-backs. So let's see where they are come the end of the window. We're going to talk Manchester United with Samuel Luckhurst in a few minutes, so we'll come back to them. I've been told to ask you about the bottom. I hate asking about the bottom 3 because it's the most difficult one to predict, because most of these teams are going to sack their manager. Somebody else will be in by Christmas, and it changes the entire dynamic of the bottom 3. But it does seem, and something again I just noticed when we're doing season previews, an awful lot of them teams outside the lot of top 6 haven't done a huge amount of good business. There's not too many standout players outside the top 6 in terms of arrivals into the Premier League. And a lot of teams down the bottom, like Bournemouth, like Fulham, are still in the midst of doing their work, the promoted sides. And Forest, the complete opposite. They've signed, you know, signed a dozen players at this stage. Who are you quite worried about at the start of this season?
Me? I tell you what, I'm worried about certainly about Fulham and Bournemouth. I mean, you mentioned Forest, and if you're say Fulham and you had Nico Williams who did so well for you, and then he goes back to Liverpool, then he ends up at Forest, you'll be worried. They've only got 2 fit centre backs, Fulham. I think they played Villarreal the other day. They only had 16 players. If you go back to the last time they got promoted, they kind of kept with the same team, and they ended up then by Christmas with a team of loanees. Scotty Parker brought in a whole raft of players, but none of them were permanent. And in the end, it seemed like it was a club that was just built on guest players, really. And then when they got relegated, they had to build again. I think I'd be really worried about Fulham. Mitrovic will score the goals, we know that. And the next one will be Bournemouth. Because Bournemouth were built on the best defence last season, but half of it's gone. Cahill gone, Cook gone, Nat Phillips gone, back to Liverpool. So I know Travis signed a new deal. That's good news for him. But I don't know. I think if you're Scotty Parker, I think you'd be worried. I think they lost to Bristol City pre-season. He said he needed drastic improvement. And I think going up into the Premier League, if you're Fulham and you've only got 16 players, you've only got 2 centre-backs. If you're Bournemouth and 3/4 of your back line's gone, I think you'd be a little bit worried.
The thing about just mentioning Mitrovic, Mitrovic is that I think he's one of those lads that like Dan would back him to be the top scorer in the Championship, but it's he scored the goals in the Premier League as well. It's such a massive step up. Memories again of that Serbia game, we go back to it, but like this is just a massive step up. Will he score the goals?
Yeah, well, you can sort of feel that he's a very good international striker and a good Championship striker, because he just lacks that tiny little bit of pace that maybe you need in the Premier League. Like a couple of other teams that are interesting at the bottom, like Everton losing Richarlison, and it feels as though there's a very bad vibe around the club at the moment. You can imagine Goodison Park a month into the season and it's pretty hostile for everybody involved. And Leeds, who again have lost Rafinha, their best player. Now Patrick Bamford is back and seems to be playing really well in pre-season, so maybe that changes things. But Jesse Marsh is another one who the Leeds fans don't seem fully convinced by. Would you be worried about either of those in terms of relegation?
I would. I mean, certainly if you're Everton, I think it looks like he's the bookie favourite at the minute. Frank Lampard to go down. Now I know they've made some good signings. I think Dwight McNeil is a really good player, but his actual numbers last season were dreadful. I know it was a season where Burnley went down, but nonetheless, I think he had 1 goal, 1 assist, something like that. Look, I think he is a good player, make no mistake, but he didn't have a great season last season. I think Frank will have to hit the ground running. And I don't know, like Vinagre, for example, we've seen him before at Wolves coming back into the Premier League, but he didn't play in the Premier League before, not that often, I don't think, for Wolves. So I certainly think I'll be thinking that Everton, the fans there, I don't think it'll take them long to turn if they get off to a bad start.
All right, David Connolly, always part of our starting team.
It's the only place. It's the only place.
Hopefully that won't be replayed in a couple of months. Remember when you said this, Nathan?
Yeah, where am I? David, great stuff.
Cheers, lads. Take care.
All right, OTB AM is brought to you live every morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. All right, now time for the sports pages.
There are so many idiots out there, so many spoofers. There's a lot of horse.
I think he's a total spoofer.
What do you mean a spoofer?
He's just bullshit.
No, Eamon, come on, don't be. No, I'm not having that. No.
These are the parts of the show that's pressure, Johnny, when you're sitting in the presenter's chair. The papers, I've just them all thrown down here and now I have to find them. And now I'm going to start with the Times of London.
Looks like you're
missing. Which is not where you want to start at all. Yeah. Henderson and United tirade. This is interesting. John Duggan's arrived in the studio as well.
Nathan
morning,
and Johnny, good morning.
Manchester United, we're going to talk about them with Samuel Luckhurst, but what a mess. What an absolute mess. Producer Cullum, Manchester United supporter, felt things are going well on the pitch, but off the pitch, it's a shambles right now.
It's never-ending carousel of...
Dean Henderson. I saw these quotes yesterday and I kind of thought, poor Dean, young lad, has done an interview. It's sort of been totally taken out of context, blown out of proportion completely. And then I sat down this morning and actually it's all there, sitting down in front of the camera. I basically saying I got out of the club before the new manager came in, because if there's no shortage of confidence with Dean Henderson, if he came in and saw me in training, he'd want to keep me. But I made sure he didn't see me in training. I was out of here. Very annoyed. Was told he was going to be first choice last season. He claims was told he was going to be first choice. Got COVID and never got back in and basically wasted a year of his career. But it feels, again, John, when you read this, that like it's open season at Manchester United. Like there's no respect for hierarchy. Anyone can say and do whatever the hell they want.
Well, Eric Ten Hag is that disciplinarian who's coming in, but the De Jong thing is really symbolic of the fact that, you know, are United as attractive as they were, and also the Ronaldo. It's a shadow over the whole club because he's not a pressing player these days, and that's what Eric Ten Hag wants to do. So the Ronaldo conundrum is the biggest cloud over Man United at the moment, and I went through the Racing Post. They do this thing called the Big Kickoff, and there's about 15 analysts, and every single one picked exactly the same top 4 teams. You know, Man City, Liverpool, Tottenham and Chelsea. Nobody picked Man United. Nobody picked Arsenal.
That's interesting.
And to me, I think Ten Hag's got the right idea, but it's a club where you've had too many leaks, too many disgruntled players, too many players. And what do United want to be? How do they want to play the game?
Well, what do they want to be as a club? They've been played for a fool by Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah, so I just the Ronaldo has to get out of the club. Like, talk about, you know, undermining the training sessions not being right. Maguire, oh my God!
It was interesting listening to Jonathan Wilson. We played out at 9:30, and I think the detail is going to start to creep out once Ronaldo is gone as to just how toxic an influence he was. And it's interesting how the outside world's opinion and then the difference to the dressing room. So the outside world opinion was, well, Cristiano Ronaldo is such a great professional that he can only be a positive influence on these young players. He will walk into that dressing room and they will look up and go, wow, I now have to impress the greatest player of all time. Where actually he walked into the dressing room with an unbelievable arrogance, tried to dismantle what was in place, no respect for the manager, and destroyed whatever positivity was at the club. Remember this time last year we were looking at Manchester United thinking the front three had all scored 16, 17 Premier League goals. They're all going to get better. They're going to be the most exciting team to watch. They're probably going to be City's main challengers. And now nobody's even tipping them for a top 4 place.
Well, Bruno Fernandes has not been the same player since Ronaldo came.
Not at all, JD, no.
Also, I was at the Leeds game in February at Elland Road, and Ronaldo walked around the pitch. Ronaldo can't cope, in my view, with the fact that the talent is leaving his body. And he's not the player he wants to be in his mind, and he can't cope with that. And I think that's causing issues with him internally, and therefore he's thrown his toys out of the pram about it.
I think his body language in games last season was exactly betraying what JD is saying there, yeah. And maybe that's part of what made him great, that utter self-belief. But obviously we all slow down, and it's a massive problem. They need to get rid of him.
But he's big. Is he bigger than the club right now? Like, if Ten Hag is this disciplinarian, like, he has a row with Ronaldo in the first half on Sunday, and Ronaldo leaves the stadium. Like, literally, when he's taken off at half time, walks out, leaves the stadium, doesn't hang around afterwards. Like, and maybe it's just not good business sense, but if you're a disciplinarian, do you not come in on Monday and say, this is done? Like, don't come back.
Yeah, Ferguson should not be involved.
100%.
Either.
Yeah.
Like, Klopp and Guardiola, I always think of Guardiola is the man. He is the star at Manchester City. Like, I'm surprised that Raheem Sterling left, but they're just, like, Haaland, if Haaland's not cutting it, you know, there's only really one winner there, and it won't be Erling Haaland. Hopefully he will.
Who was the Irish manager that had a brief spell as Man United manager post Busby?
Franco Farrell.
Do you remember the stories of how, like, Busby sort of still had his own kind of like office, and he was always subservient? How is Fergie still involved in anything?
Like, another one.
Just seems completely mad. And like, Fergie obviously has a blinkered view on Ronaldo as well.
It's funny that Fergie was the first person after 15 years who changed that.
Yeah.
He was Fergie.
And now we've gone all the way back.
And now Fergie's that other person.
It's mad.
In a purely footballing sense, it does mean United are in limbo going into the new season, because most of the teams had their business done. So Liverpool signed Darwin Núñez, Manchester City signed Erling Haaland. They've had a full pre-season with them. Who is the starting number 9 for Manchester United this weekend? Is it Marcus Rashford? Is it Anthony Elanga? Is it Anthony Martial? Who is their star striker that's going to score them 20 goals? And do they now rush in if Cristiano Ronaldo leaves? And it does seem that all the signs are pointing towards Ronaldo's going to go to either back to Sporting Lisbon on loan for the year. It's just insanity when you think about it, or go off to the MLS. Where are they in terms of their first 11? They are in a way the most interesting team, and the team that we know least about in terms of those top 4 predictions, because there is a possibility that Ten Hag is brilliant and that he gets everybody who's there back playing the way they were. Like, he gets Marcus Rashford back to being one of the best talents in English football, but it does feel unlikely.
The Rashford one, like, his form fell off a cliff to such an extent. It's an awful, we spoke about Aaron Connolly at the top of the show. It's a real leap of faith to think that he could come. I mean, it's one thing coming back to form, but to make that much, Langa is probably the more interesting one. Martial has been deeply frustrating. I don't know. What do you think, JD? Like, it's
well, I think there's so much soap opera around the club that it's not even in people's mind about what they're going to do. So it's a huge amount of uncertainty. Whereas where you think whether Nunes will work out, or whether Haaland will work out, or whether Spurs with their effectively 8 signings with the 2 other lads that joined in January, or with Chelsea with Sterling and Koulibaly, you all have a certainty about what they're doing. And as Nathan says, I don't have any certainty about Man United until I see them in the first game.
It must be exceptionally difficult for even the best manager in the world.
It is interesting that they did finish second, Tony, was it a couple of years ago?
Yeah. Kind of a flattered second that season. Yeah. But for any manager to come into that dressing room, it must be an incredibly difficult job. And I wouldn't.
But they're all difficult jobs. Liverpool's a difficult job.
It isn't. It isn't. No, but if you inherited the Liverpool dressing room, you inherited a really good dressing room. Like, you inherited a car crash, Man United, and you can't just go in and solve it. Like, even look at the Maguire situation. Like, has Maguire become a liability now? Like, I mean.
Maybe Ronaldo leaving changes things. Like, does he play? Like, is it Lisandro Martinez and Rafael Varane as the centre back? So they're home to Brighton Sunday.
Are there just defects in Maguire's game? Is it the fact that is he just a little bit like he had a brilliant World Cup, but everybody at that World Cup had a brilliant World Cup. He had a great World Cup,
The other thing about it, JD, is like we speak about Man United every bloody Saturday here. It's Man United, Man United have been in irrelevance in terms of the title race for a long time now. But it's like we have this history.
They came second 18 months ago.
But also, Johnny, they're the second biggest supporter club in Ireland. So.
No, sorry, that's not. I'm not talking about the Irish context, but Man United as a club now, and you're talking about are they as attractive to a player? They're not really a relevant club in terms of the top echelons anymore. No. They've fallen off that.
Liverpool in the 90s.
Yeah, exactly, and they're like Liverpool have knocked them well off their perch at this stage, and it will take time for Man United because City and the levels at City. I mean, even you look at Spurs and the signings that Arsenal have made, and Chelsea. These are really good sides. They've probably no chance of winning the league. So what chance Man United have of being relevant this season?
John Claffey's comment on YouTube: Ronaldo's the typical player Fergie would have got rid of back in the day. They'll still think United have a top 4 shot. Chelsea and Arsenal unknown. Ten Hag, even with no more signings, should improve this lot. I'd say United Brighton, we got live on Sunday on Off the Ball. The 2 most interesting teams on the opening weekend, I think, are United and Arsenal on Friday night away at Crystal Palace. This feels
that was the fixture last season that they.
This feels like Arsenal's biggest game in years.
Yeah,
like there's so much positive momentum behind them. And it's the sort of game against the Palace side who I think could have a really good season and would be brilliant to watch with Eze and Zaha and a lot of good attacking talent. Like, all of the hype and everything around Arsenal, like the bubble bursts instantly if they don't go
win
at Palace.
That happened last season at Brentford, the first day of the season.
They lost their first 3 last season, but they had a good season thereafter, to be fair.
The question mark of Arsenal is still, are they too soft? And Palace on a Friday night, and I'm glad all over, they'll be all singing. It's a great atmosphere at the evening game. I was at an evening game there a couple of years ago. They're good defensively. I think Vieira knows what he's doing. And this is just a test of Arsenal's character. Now, I think Gallagher is a loss for Palace, but I do think it's a test of Arsenal's character. If they get scrape a 1-0 win, that could be a great thing for them.
What you got in the sports news this morning,
John? Well, Rangers obviously with that uphill task now to qualify for the playoff round of the Champions League. Quite a meek defeat to Union SG in the first leg of their third qualifying round tie last night. 2-0 defeat, so the return game at Ibrox next Tuesday. Shamrock Rovers got an interest in what's happening in that qualifier between Karabag of Azerbaijan and Ferencvaros of Hungary this evening, because the loser will play either Shkupi or Rovers in the playoff round for the Europa League. Bernd Leno moving to Fulham from Arsenal, £8 million. Dean Henderson we've spoken about there. Chelsea have agreed a fee with Aston Villa, 20 million for the transfer of Carney Chukwuemeka, if I pronounce that correctly. I'll probably say it in a different way 10 different times between now and whenever Saturday. So he's made 12 appearances for Villa last season, the 18-year-old. We know that John Eustace has left. 4 coaches now. It'll be with Stephen Kenny by the time the next person comes in, all for different reasons. Cricket-wise, Ireland face South Africa in a T20 international in Bristol this evening. Sligo hosts Racing from 5:30. And sad news from the world of American sports broadcasting. Vin Scully has passed away at the age of 94, legendary baseball commentator. Covered the Dodgers in Brooklyn, and then when they moved to Los Angeles for nearly 7 decades, also was an announcer for CBS, NBC nationally, did baseball, did American football, did golf, and very, identifiable man, and sad news that he's passed away.
You just mentioned on the racing front, I just want to mention Wesley Joyce as well. Wesley Joyce had a shocking fall in Galway last week, and just want to mention that he's in the thoughts of everyone in racing. It's the information about him has been kind of there hasn't been much coming forward because it's a perilous enough situation at the moment. We just hope that Wesley will be okay, because a fall on the flat can be bad, and Wesley had a bad fall. He's a kid who don't know if you know his story, Nathan. He's come from Moyross, come from one of the sort of the tougher areas of Limerick, and rose through the ranks through race, and has done really well, and I just hope that things work out okay for him.
Yeah, we definitely echo that. There's a road there. The
road crossing, yeah.
I think those road crossings, I don't know if they need to be looked at. But
yeah, people look at race meetings and they think it's kind of they don't understand the dangers involved. Particularly if you fall on the flat at 40, give or take 40 miles an hour, and horses are coming behind you. It's very, very dangerous. And he's a young lad who hit a thump, and I know his family are around him and looking after him. And let's just hope it works out for him.
Yeah.
All right. John, thanks as always.
All right, Nathan, Johnny.
OTB AM is brought to you live every morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. A reminder that Off the Ball is heading back to Vicar Street in association with Cadbury FC. We got a massive roadshow coming your way Wednesday, August 17th. Ian Wright, Michael Owen, Karen Carney and Emma Byrne are going to be our guests on the night. There'll be some brilliant stories reminiscing on their time in the game and also looking ahead to the new season. It is an exclusive off-air event. Tickets go on sale this week, so keep an eye on our social channels. A reminder that ticket proceeds will go towards supporting Irish women's grassroots football. Terms and conditions apply, and we hope to see you all there on the night. Now, I'm delighted to be joined on the line by the Chief Manchester United writer for the Manchester Evening News. Samuel Luckhurst is with us. Good morning, Samuel.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on again.
It's a pleasure, and we are.
Well, there's never not something to talk about. Anyway.
Certainly, when it comes to Manchester United, we've just been talking about the lack of talk of Manchester United and what will happen on the pitch in terms of formation and structure, because it is an absolute circus again this summer with Manchester United, particularly around Cristiano Ronaldo. And we've spoken to a few different people on this over the last few days, and the signs seem to be pointing that Ronaldo won't be there at the end of this transfer window, that it could well be a move on loan back to Sporting Lisbon. What's your understanding of what's likely to happen over the next couple of weeks?
I think there's certainly a conscious effort on Ronaldo's part and his team's part to try and keep him as relevant as possible. They've had Chelsea mentioned, you've had Bayern Munich mentioned, Atletico Madrid mentioned. Some of those links have been credible, have been concrete. There have been some discussions. In the case of others, that there haven't been any discussions, and some of the clubs have been a little bit bemused by it all. As far as Sporting Lisbon are concerned, it's another obvious team to link him with. It would be going back to Portugal. It's the team he started his career at, and most importantly, they're a Champions League side. Quite how they would actually afford his wages, I don't know. That's the other stumbling block there. But again, I think as long as Ronaldo's at United, his team, obviously Jorge Mendes is his agent, and normally in football, if there is an agent who can make the impossible possible, it is Jorge Mendes. But for those of us who are covering United,
how much of a motivating factor for Ronaldo is money right now?
Well, he's had a big salary cut by United not qualifying for the Champions League. All the players have had a 25% hit as far as their
thoughts and prayers are with Ronaldo at this time and all that.
Yeah. I know. I mean, it's one of the reasons why Nottingham Forest had no problem covering all of Dean Henderson's wages, because although Henderson does earn excess of 100 grand a week, that's obviously been slashed to a 5-figure amount. So it's easier for Forest to be able to get a good goalkeeper in, a Premier League goalkeeper in, to become their number one. But as far as Ronaldo's concerned, I think Champions League football and trying to remain and stay among the elite is the major factor. But obviously, when you're on a big salary and you take quite a hit to it, and there might be another club out there who would offer you more, that's always going to be an incentive. But I do genuinely think that sporting reasons do trump the money in this case.
What are the feelings, Samuel, around Manchester United fans at this stage, from your perspective, in relation to Ronaldo?
It's a little bit mixed. There has been a shift in mood because of how they've played in pre-season, particularly on the pre-season tour, where you've seen 3 20-something forwards play quite well, score, move fluidly. It was quite telling that at half-time of the Villa game, when United were 2-0 up, and again, the front three had been playing very well, that Ronaldo posted that photo of him working out, almost again just to try and stay relevant, to remind people that he was still around, that he's still the man in his eyes, or the king, as he said last week. But ultimately, he is the most dependable goal scorer in that team. And it has got to the point now where, because it has become a bit of a circus, a lot of fans wouldn't mind it if he just packed up his tents and left town, a little bit like with the Paul Pogba scenario. But with Ronaldo, at least it won't go on for as long as it did with Pogba. But if he does stay, I think United fans would accept that, because we've been in this situation before, going back to 2008. He was agitating to leave for Real Madrid that year. Sir Alex Ferguson got one more year out of him, and then you had a season where there was a lot of scrutiny on him. He would score a goal, he wouldn't celebrate. That was the story. The Madrid speculation, well, it wasn't speculation. It was, it was concrete information. That kept on going up until the point that he did finally leave the club a year later. So for those of us who remember that, this is all familiar territory, and this is the baggage you get when you sign Ronaldo.
Nathan spoke about this before you came on, how he had this, this reputation maybe that, he was such a professional in the dressing room, and this didn't prove to be the case, where he was effectively a prima donna from the outset. I guess from looking at it from my perspective last season, whatever Ronaldo achieved, and I think you can debate this, whereas you mentioned, Samuel, the goals he scored, there was an absolute collective collapse in the offensive unit apart from Ronaldo. All of the other players, their form more or less tailed off badly. So is there murmurs from the dressing room in terms of like those attacking players? Obviously Rashford is the obvious one we mentioned as well, Fernandes, whose form. So Ronaldo must be some sort of a negative influence there in the dressing room.
Well, from what I gathered last season, his presence and his professionalism in the dressing room was largely appreciated, particularly in the last days of Solskjaer's reign. He was pretty much telling the players that they had to remain 100% committed, to give as much as they got, even if they didn't believe in the manager. He was quite open about not backing Solskjaer, but it didn't stop him from trying to affect results and gain points. And you go back to Solskjaer's last weeks, he got a couple of stay of executions because of Ronaldo, whether it was the winner at Tottenham or the 2 goals he scored against Atalanta. It delayed the inevitable, but Ronaldo was one of the few players who you could definitely say was still trying and putting a shift in. And although Rangnick had reservations about him, Ronaldo ended that pretty disastrous tenure as United's best player as well. Again, there's a lot of baggage with him. He's earned that because of the brilliant player he's been, and there are unedifying sides to his not his game as such, but his makeup, I guess, his personality. Obviously, some didn't like the fact that he left the stadium early on Sunday, even though other players left as well before full time. And he's going to get more scrutinised than others because he is Cristiano Ronaldo. But he is by and large appreciated by his teammates. There will be some players who will be hoping that he does go. I would imagine Maguire is one of them, because he certainly felt cowed by Ronaldo's presence at United last season. And it was common knowledge last season as well. It got to the point that Ronaldo really didn't necessarily rate Maguire as United captain, but he wasn't the only one there. There are a number of players in that dressing room who are still at the club who just do not believe in Harry Maguire as United captain.
So just on that, Samuel, is that personality wise or because of the quality of his play?
I don't think so much the quality of his play. I think there's an appreciation that he is a good defender, but ultimately, and this is an opinion shared by a lot of United supporters as well, they look at Harry Maguire and they think you're not a Man United captain. And he's not the first. I mean, the recent list of captains has been an underwhelming list. I mean, Antonio Valencia had it for a year, and I think in all his time in England, he probably spoke about a dozen words of English on camera. Then it was Ashley Young, and that only lasted 6 months before he went to Inter Milan. And then Maguire got it just six months into his United career. So it was a pretty premature appointment, but he was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's man. He was the £80 million signing. He was on a 6-year contract. It made a lot of sense from the manager's perspective, but objectively, there were a lot of issues with making Maguire captain, and so that's proved to be the case looking at last season.
It's so important as well, Simon, is that when you look at Henderson and you look at the Liverpool, what they are, what they embody, and this was a feature of Man United, because Maguire, you could tell from looking at his performances, he's not a bad footballer, but you could tell he was making mistakes and his body language, he was all over the place. But this lack of leadership, it was a serious issue, you could tell in that team week to week.
It certainly was, and I didn't notice it at the time, but when Ronaldo scored his third goal against Norwich to put United 3-2 up again, they were 2-0 up, it went 2-2, it was spiralling, Pogba was getting abused, but then Ronaldo did what he often did last season and he won the game. There was a clip afterwards that a fan had filmed of Maguire in that he was the only outfield player who didn't celebrate with Ronaldo. And a lot of fans picked up on that to the point that a few weeks later, when I was, I think, in attendance for the last home game of the season, Ronaldo came off, or he was getting a round of applause for something. And some supporters noticed that Maguire was sat down and not applauding, and they started to give Maguire jib over it. They asked him to show some effing respect, I believe was the words used by one supporter. So Maguire has lost a lot of confidence in the fan base. He's lost a lot of confidence among teammates. But then when you go look at the booing he received recently in Melbourne, certainly things like that can work in his favour, because it will, whip up the other section of the United fan base who are supportive and who would never turn on the players to get behind him. And that certainly happened last season after the booing from ingrate England fans during the March internationals.
Something that Ronaldo and Harry Maguire do have in common is that they top this list that was released yesterday of most abused players on Twitter last season. It was research carried out by the Alan Turing Institute and Ofcom analysed 2.3 million messages directed at Premier League players over the last 5 months of last season. It found 60,000 posts deemed abusive, with 68% of players in the top flight receiving at least one message in that period. Ronaldo received the most, followed by Harry Maguire and then Marcus Rashford. 8 Manchester United players featured in the top 10. Now, part of it is, I'm sure that Cristiano Ronaldo has by far the biggest following on social media, so maybe is always going to attract more. But like Harry Kane and Jack Grealish, the only non-Manchester United players in the top 10. Again, it just underlines this huge negativity that seems to be surrounding the club at the moment.
Yeah, there's quite an easy way of separating certain fan bases on Twitter, and for some time it's appeared that Uniteds have been the angriest because they've not won anything in 5 years, because they're mired in all sorts of shambles from time to time. Last season they couldn't go a month without a crisis. It felt like there was a crisis every week. I suppose Ronaldo's towards the top of that list, or tops that list, because you've got this rivalry with Lionel Messi fanboys on Twitter, because Ronaldo by and large doesn't get much abuse at all he doesn't get any abuse from knowledgeable and sus Manchester United supporters. With Maguire, I thought he might have been in a league of his own, because he has really copped a hell of a lot of flack for quite a long time at United. There's this warped faction of the United fan base, which is quite bizarre in that they do not like English players playing for England's most famous football club. That was an issue when Dean Henderson was vying with David De Gea for the goalkeeping position just over a year ago. It was just blinded by some supporters preferring a foreign goalkeeper and abhorring the prospect of an English goalkeeper being in goal. And there are some who think that Solskjaer showed too much solidarity with English players last season. I can't see any proof of that. I mean, just take Marcus Rashford, for example. He dropped him quite quickly after he came back into the team, and Rashford felt that his development was hindered by Solskjaer's management and lack of coaching. He wasn't someone who stepped onto the training pitch. But as you say, with the season starting just 4 days' time, and for them to have only made 3 signings, only sold 1 player in this summer where there was supposed to be this massive squad rebuild, they're massively behind the curve again. But I don't think there's been a point in the last 9 years where they've actually been ahead of the curve at all.
So just to put a wrap on the Ronaldo situation, like we comment in from John Claffey saying Ronaldo's the typical player Fergie would have got rid of back in the day, and Ferguson is obviously involved in this now in the background. But in terms of what happens next, like I'm sure there's a huge PR angle for this, because from Erik ten Hag's point of view, like it'd be a big PR win if he's the one who decided, if publicly it's seen that he decided, I'm not putting up with Ronaldo leaving our friendly before the end of the game. I've had enough. I want this guy out of the club. Whereas Ronaldo's people clearly want to be seen, well, you know, United aren't a Champions League team. He's going back home to Sporting Lisbon for the love of it. Like, how is this going to develop over the next couple of weeks?
It would surprise me if it goes until deadline day, just because that's the way the player and his team are operating. And United, their hands are tied unless they get an acceptable bid that comes in. But it is something that's where Ronaldo is actually back in the fold again. I think it's only going to intensify. It was quite noticeable during a stoppage in the first half against Vallecano on Saturday when Ten Hag made a beeline for Ronaldo. Obviously, all of us, the press box was pretty sparse, but those of us there were scrutinising what was going on. It was quite apparent that Ronaldo didn't necessarily appreciate what Ten Hag was saying, just going off the body language. But when Ronaldo comes out on Instagram, on commenting on an account that worships him, that he follows, and says the king is playing on Sunday, that's a power play in itself. You can imagine the way Ten Hag is trying to manage that squad, and he has managed it very well from what we've observed on the pre-season tour. He's brought discipline back in. Authority has been restored to the manager's role at United. That's not been there for 4 years, dating back to the summer, Jose Mourinho's last summer, where they undermined him and they didn't back him, because then his replacement was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And one of the first things he did was to empower Paul Pogba, which was, again, just kowtowing to this player power coterie at the club. And that's only ended because Pogba's gone and a couple of others have left as well. So Ten Hag has got the authority and United are backing him. But unless they get an offer that's going to be deemed acceptable, that reflects the last year of the greatest goal scorer in the game's history contract, they can't do much about it. And they've got to try and make it work with Ronaldo while he is still there. But as we saw last year with Juventus, that deal to United happened very late on in August, and United only signed him because he was going to join Manchester City. So when push comes to shove, maybe a club will be tempted to go for him. But Atletico, Chelsea, Bayern Munich, despite all the noise that's been whipped up by Ronaldo's camp, there's not much noise or much interest coming from those clubs whatsoever at this stage.
So United start their season against Brighton on Sunday at Old Trafford, 2 o'clock kickoff. It's going to be live on Off the Ball. The first day of the season is the most difficult one for commentators, because you're trying to figure out what's been happening in pre-season and new signings and who's going to start where. And United have signed Lisandro Martinez, Terrell Malaysia in defence, and then Christian Eriksen has come in as well. What is the Manchester United team likely to look like on Sunday in terms of formation and in terms of who will be getting a start? Do my job for me is what I'm saying, basically, Samuel.
Yeah, it would seem like they will go with 4-2-3-1, and I think maybe only one of those new signings will start. Ten Hag has prioritised continuity across pre-season, so rather than just completely changing the starting 11 for one game, he's tried to maintain, as I say, match rhythm, bedding players in. Victor Lindelof, who is effectively the fourth choice centre-back, he's actually started in 5 of the pre-season games. The only one he didn't start in was the Vallecano game on Sunday, which was reserved for the reserves, if you like, because United played against Atletico Madrid in Oslo on Saturday. And it is, again, remarkable when I say that they've signed 3 players and not one of them is an out-and-out central midfielder. So the likelihood is that the midfield on Sunday against Brighton will be Scott McTominay and Fred, which you can imagine the meltdown that's going to cause on Twitter when the team is confirmed and it's those two again. Fred, in fairness to him, was one of the few players who actually performed well under Ralph Rangnick, and he's had a very good pre-season as well. With McTominay, he has a ceiling, and that's been apparent for quite some time. And maybe Ten Hag can improve him because United actually now have a permanent manager who does the coaching, who leaves the office and manages players in a very specific way. And the drills they've been doing in pre-season, having observed them, have been very innovative, and there's always been a purpose to them. And United are trying to play a more sophisticated, proactive, possession-based style. And you could see how well the players actually adapted to that, which was maybe one of the more surprising things on tour, that the players proved that they're not bad players, as bad as they were last season. When they've got a good coach overseeing things, they can adapt quite quickly. But there's only so much Ten Hag can mask as a very good coach, because although the football's improved and the coaching has improved, the squad has barely improved. They're so short or light of proven attackers. And at the moment, they're hanging their hat on Anthony Martial to be the dependable goal scorer, the number 9. And certainly entering the summer, his future was extremely uncertain. There was not a lot of fanfare about him whatsoever coming out from Old Trafford. But he's the starting number 9. Yet you look at his time at United, he's had 7 seasons there. Only 2 of them have been genuinely good seasons. He scored 8 goals for the club in the last 2 seasons. And when he's presented with competition, whether it's been Ibrahimovic or Sanchez or Cavani or Ronaldo, he's crumbled. And so it wasn't a surprise on the pre-season tour, where he was completely devoid of any competition, that he played well. And he's impressed the coaches, and he'll certainly start the season. But whether he's going to all of a sudden transform into a mid-20s goal scorer for the upcoming season remains to be seen. So I think it's pretty clear at this stage anyway that they're going to be active in the transfer market right up until deadline day, because they're just too short in too many departments still.
And the central midfield position, you mentioned McTominay and Fred, and what inevitably will come at the weekend when they start in that 2 in midfield. I sort of assumed throughout last season that Declan Rice would be a Manchester United player this summer. He's been linked with them for so long. It's such an obvious player to come in and take hold of that position. Have they done anything about that central midfield role? And is there a reason why their interest in Rice from the outside looks like it's cooled?
They just could not get him this summer. They are restricted by the profile of targets they can get, because they're not a Champions League club anymore. They've just had their most disastrous season probably since the relegation in 1974. They are a tough sell to a lot of players, the calibre of players that they would like to have. And in Rice's case, with his contract situation, I think West Ham were always confident they could keep him for 1 more year. But there is going to come a point where they're going to have to sell him, because his value may dwindle. He's not going to want to be at West Ham for the rest of his career. Let's be frank about that. West Ham had their best season in years and years and years last season. United had their worst season in decades, and United still finished above West Ham with David Moyes there. Very good coach, there he is, and he's done a really good job at West Ham. Again, there's a ceiling, and I think last season was probably as good as it got for West Ham. I certainly don't see them finishing above United this season or forcing their way into the Champions League. Maybe they'd have done it last season had they won the Europa League, of course, but they fell short there eventually. So Rice was just not on the agenda for United this summer. Last summer, they probably had a better chance of signing him, but again, he was unattainable just because of the length left on his contract. And obviously, I think West Ham can trigger it by a year as well, which just delays the inevitable, because again, nobody envisages him seeing out his career at West Ham or signing a new contract there. So that's why they've been in for Frankie de Jong for, I believe it's 12 weeks to the day since they first contacted Barcelona about him. And the only reason they're in for Frankie de Jong is because of the manager. If they'd hired Mauricio Pochettino, they would not be touching de Jong with a barge pole, but they are continuing with this potentially disastrous pursuit of de Jong because they're emboldened by Ten Hag's working relationship with him, despite all the pretty pessimistic noises coming out of de Jong's camp and coming out of Barcelona.
I think Samuel touches on it there. That's for a West Ham player, Manchester United was a hard sell, and for other players, and John Duggan said it here earlier, Samuel, there are obvious echoes now between Manchester United right now and Liverpool around about the time I started supporting Liverpool in the Graham Souness days and then you had Roy Evans, and just they became a bit of an irrelevance in the title race. That's where Man United are at the moment.
It's a really fascinating parallel, because with Ferguson being brought back into the fold, or certainly being consulted more on certain matters, and David Gill being consulted more on certain matters, it's almost as if they are trying to prolong this boot room culture that Liverpool tried to. And when Liverpool did it, it didn't work. It failed. It was only when they abandoned that culture completely by empowering Houllier in getting rid of Roy Evans and making him the standalone manager that success returned. I think a lot of people forget. It maybe came back to... It got more publicity when Houllier sadly passed away, but he did a terrific job for Liverpool, winning those 3 trophies in 2001 and then getting them up to second the following season. And United, I mean, Ibrahimovic touched upon it in his book. I think he said they were stuck in the past with what they were doing. They are trying to be more progressive with the way they do things, but when you bring in Ferguson back into the fold, who absolutely great manager that he was for United and did great things for that club, but I don't necessarily think that they should be, seeking his advice on things when he's been an ambassador for 9 years. And David Gill was an extremely overrated chief executive as well. It was just a case of Sir Alex Ferguson asking him to sign players and he would sign them. And in the case of maybe Wesley Sneijder or Mesut Ozil or all these other players that they didn't sign, he didn't sign them. But I think because he's associated with the glory days, it colours a lot of people's view of him, that he's this figure of success and he should be integral to getting United up and running again and making them a credible force. But they just can't separate or divorce themselves from the glory era. They have to have some form of attachment with someone there, whether it was the ludicrous decision of keeping Solskjaer as long as they did, or re-signing Ronaldo because he was only going to join Manchester City. And until somebody comes in and is objective, and let's face it, Rangnick was an objective troubleshooter there last season. He was fascinating to listen to, not a particularly good manager, but I think his way in terms of how United should operate was pretty sound. And his consultancy contract was ripped up before it had even become active. I think Ten Hag was not even a week into the job when Rangnick was let go. And we could see that coming as well. But again, for those of us who cover United quite meticulously, I just don't see the sense in this attachment to the past. I think it's becoming a weakness.
To wrap up, the lads on TalkSport would say couldn't believe their luck when they sat down with Dean Henderson yesterday, where he went to town on Manchester United. Obviously was backup keeper last season to David De Gea. He said he was promised that he'd be the number one. Said, I turned down so many good loan moves last summer for that reason, and they wouldn't let me go. It was frustrating to sit there, waste 12 months. It's criminal really. At my age, I was fuming. Has Dean Henderson got reason to be frustrated?
Yeah, you can see why United never put him up for interview when he came back to the club for those 2 seasons. And I think he said that as well yesterday. He said it's evident I've not done an interview for 2 years, even ahead of Europa League games or Champions League. I
just don't know why. I just don't know why they wouldn't let me speak.
I know. But I did that story last year that he was promised to be number one, but then he contracted COVID. He was laid low with it. The transfer window closed. But again, that was just indecisiveness, classic indecisiveness from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, in that he didn't follow through with that decision. Tom Heaton rejoined the club on the understanding that he would be the number 2 because United intended to phase out De Gea, probably try and get him out on loan, because there was no way a club who are dreadful at selling players would have sold their highest earner at the time and someone who had 3 years left on his contract. But then what happens is that De Gea ends up being the players' player of the season and finished runner-up to Ronaldo and the fans' player of the season, because Solskjaer just did not have the the courage to stick to his guns and go with Henderson, which was the original plan. And Henderson got fobbed off a couple of times in the 2021 season, where Solskjaer promised him he would start games, then he'd renege on that pledge, and De Gea would start. That season was remarkable in that Henderson only became the number one for a short period because of a pregnant woman. De Gea left to go on paternity leave in Spain when his wife gave birth, I think in March of 2021, which nobody would have blamed him for, especially at that time with the pandemic. And that's the only reason why Dean Henderson had the run of games that he did and became number one, as I say, for a very brief period. And then it was COVID that allowed Solskjaer to restore De Gea as number one the next season, and Henderson barely got a look in. And let's face it, Henderson was not the only player at United who suffered because of Solskjaer's indecisiveness. Donny van der Beek, Jesse Lingard, Edinson Cavani, Axel Tuanzebe, Diogo Dalot, the list goes on. There were so many disgruntled players because Solskjaer's man management, which certainly at the start of his reign was tactful and certainly successful, just wasn't working anymore. And as I said, that indecisiveness just didn't help the dressing room dynamic at the club.
All right, Samuel Luckhurst, there's plenty to talk about as always when it comes to Manchester United. That was great stuff.
Yeah. Thank you ever so much. Thank you for having me on.
All right, you can get your messages in as always on our
social
had him on
before while I've been on. I thought he was excellent.
But he refused to come on with you previously.
He's just like he's an encyclopedia, and he's almost like the antidote of what it must be like to be a Man United fan. He's just so laid back and measured in everything he says, and it's that boot room analogy is quite interesting because, I mean,
but also the one thing I think when the comparisons to Liverpool come up is like time moves so quickly when you think about it. Like the year 2000 is 10 years since Liverpool had won the league, and it felt like a lifetime. Maybe because of the age we were, but like it's nearly 10 years since Manchester United. So all those kids who were 8 to 15, like they now don't remember Manchester United being world dominant.
Yeah, it's true, and you know the game has moved on so fast as well. Like the way that Guardiola is playing now, and in fairness, these Klopp and Guardiola eras, with the kind of the failure of football in Italy, and obviously the demise of Real and Barca, at least in the short term, English football is the place to be, and there's so much money in the game. So Manchester United are in the strongest league that there probably has ever been anywhere, and it's not like they're pathetically bad, but it takes
weren't far off at the time.
They weren't, but it takes a hell of a standard to be a challenger, and they're miles off it. And it's not I just think, how can you go? I'm not trying to be ageist here, but how can you go to Alex Ferguson after all the time he's been out of the game and try to use him as a sort of a means to bring Ronaldo in? Who's Ronaldo?
Well, he's clearly got an incredibly close relationship, and maybe they thought Ronaldo will be honest. We can push the agent to one side, even though George Mendes is in the crowd, and we'll leave him out of the room. We'll shut the door. We'll put Ronaldo and Ferguson together, and we'll get some honesty. And if Ronaldo wants to go, we'll let him go. But if the agent is pushing him and really he wants to stay, maybe we can turn this around. Whether that's the right thing to do or not, I'm not sure.
He has to be kicked out as soon as possible. Maybe Samuel's right. In true Manchester United fashion, not only in terms of the player himself, but in terms of the storyline just going on until the death. It will go on, I guess, until transfer day. But it's untenable for Ten Hag to have any sort of stamp on things. He has to go, obviously.
I thought we were going to have to do another 15 minutes with Samuel when he mentioned that Dean Henderson was only number one because of a pregnant woman. I thought this is going to be something incredibly salacious.
We got a headline out of it.
It was David De Gea's wife.
We definitely got a headline out of it.
It was
misleading headline.
Nothing in it, but great stuff from Samuel there. OTB AM brought to you live every morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. OTB Sports Radio, always available on the OTB app. 1 o'clock, Chris Waddle, Football Magic, well worth listening to. Koi Gig at 3, a retro panel then from 4, and then Michael Owen talks life after football from 6. OTB is live on the radio and News Talk from 7 tonight with Joe. You can follow Off the Ball across all our social channels, subscribe to YouTube, and be sure to download the OTB Sports app for the latest in sports content and analysis. After the break, it is the return of Deal or No Deal with Phil Egan, 2 days out from the start of the new Premier League season. First though, 2-time All-Ireland winners with Meath, Monica McGurk and Stacey Grimes, joined Joe live from their homecoming celebrations to react to winning the All-Ireland on last night's show.
OTB AM on OTB.
And all your kind of thoughts on the game the night before, to be picking the ball out of the net early on, it never seemed as a group like you were overly rattled or lost your composure. It didn't seem like, sometimes those early goals for an opposition can almost make a team think, oh God, no, here we go, it's one of those days. That never really seemed to creep into the Meath body language.
No, and obviously, no keeper likes to be getting lobbed either. So, I suppose for me personally, I kind of had to just put it out of my head, because if I had have dwelled on that, I wouldn't have been able to go on and stay focused for the rest of the game. And I suppose that's how all the other players stay focused. If we make a mistake, we have to just forget about it and pick ourselves up and go again. And that's what, the panel of 1 to 38 does on the day. If we make a mistake, I know when the ball went in over my head, I turned to Mary Kay, she's like, Monica, just forget about it, move on, just go for the next ball. And that's what every single player does on the team, from the full forward line, in the midfield, and then every player that comes on, and then the subs. So, like you said, it didn't faze us, because we knew we had it in us there to pull it back, and thankfully we did.
To be fair, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I didn't think it was a deliberate lob. I thought, point was the intended...
I think so, yeah. But sure, look...
you still think, oh crap, I've been lobbed?
Yeah, I just remember the ball going over my head. I was like, that's in the back of the net.
Yeah.
So I did. But sure, look, these things happen as a goalkeeper, and these things happen, and you have to just get on with them. I suppose that's the experience of, I've been playing in goals now most of my life, and I've conceded worse goals than that, so I just kind of had to get on with it.
Okay. It doesn't help when Stacey shouts, "What are you doing?" from halfway up the pitch.
No, definitely not. Too far.
OTB AM.
The best rugby insight and analysis.
When you watch a guy, Ger, standing on the sideline counting players with his fingers, you know this is bullshit.
OTB Sports Rugby.
We talk about having to give Carberry and these players more time, but even if we give them more time, they're not going to hit the level that Johnny is hitting at, and what he brings out of other players.
Subscribe to the rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong? Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh, really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie, we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match. Because somewhere out there, there's someone for you. And GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
My first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it, what have I done? Like I walked into a circus. It's amazing, isn't it?
It's back. Deal or no deal. Phil Egan is in studio. Some people aren't happy about it, though. Johnny Ward literally just upped and left. He was sitting here 10 seconds ago and said, I've got to go. And has walked out of studio.
We hadn't even got our teeth into any deals yet. But
what did you do to Johnny?
Nothing. No,
do you know what it is? You're a Crokes man. And you've nabbed Shane Walsh. Are you not embarrassed as a Crokes man for what you're doing to the GA? The entire fabric of the GA has been ripped apart by your club.
No. That's just part and parcel of it. To be honest, the prospect of going to watch Paul Mannion and Shane Walsh playing in the same full forward line, if it goes through.
Does it put an asterisk aside anything they achieved this year? You think of the purity of clubs like Jude's, the purity of clubs like that, trying to do things the right way.
Is that where you've dropped the anchor? Jude's, is it?
Damn right.
Yeah, we used to have good tussles at Jude's, all right. But it's...
No one will ever forget the great county final of last year when it was scoreless after 20 minutes.
Yeah, that in fairness, Crokes did the double last year, but they kind of, not say stole both finals, but they took them in dramatic fashion. I'd say
it's a pattern emerging.
Yeah, big time. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm not sure if it's definitely going ahead just yet. There was a interesting story in the back of the...
And they can't stop him. Surely they can't stop him, unless he's not living there, but he says he is, so... yeah. Anyways, we're not here for, even though that could fit into dealer. We could expand deal. If there was a GA transfer window, it makes our life an awful lot easier. It's got to be said. We could extend the show by an hour, handy every day. Deal or no deal, Cristiano Ronaldo. We've just been talking about him. Will he stay or will he go?
I think he stays because I don't know who's going to put up or the wages for him. So he's 37 now. If you want to, he's not going to go abroad. He wants to play in the Champions League. Obviously,
he is abroad.
Well, he's not going to leave. When I say go further afield, he's not going to go, say, to the Middle East.
Okay.
He's not going to go to the US because he wants to play in the Champions League. He wants to just keep banging in goals in the Champions League, chipping away, extending that lead that he has at the top of the charts. And he'd be worried if he doesn't play that someone could hunt him down. But I'm not sure if that would happen. But in terms, it's just not a great start for United because they looked so promising on pre-season, the front three of Rashford, Martial and Sancho, and just so much more dynamic, and there's a unit there. Ronaldo comes in, he's going to score goals, we know that, but over the course of 38 games, will Ronaldo be a plus or will he be a hindrance for Manchester United? And personally, I think that they would be better off without him, but it's very hard to get rid of a guy that commands such a big wage, weekly wage. And I get, like, Ronaldo's standards are so high, and unfortunately right now where he wants Manchester United to be, they're just not there.
Isn't the irony is maybe they can't get there because of Cristiano Ronaldo?
There's definitely an aspect of that.
Yeah, possibly. And they've brought in Erik ten Hag to get them back to the top table and get them competing for league titles, and he has to have a full say in what happens. You know, he says all the right things when he's on camera about Ronaldo, but it'd be interesting to know what he really thinks.
Ronaldo's performance against Ireland in Faro is kind of the player he is at the moment. Like, he was absolutely awful in general play. Awful.
Should have been sent off.
And he should have been sent off, got a couple of goals.
Yeah.
But his contribution, like, there's no way Man United could ever win a league with Ronaldo at the moment, like, because he does so much of his play that's not good enough anymore.
No,
he's got to go.
Yeah,
got to go.
The way it is with United is, I mentioned the front three there of Rashford, Martial, Sancho. In recent seasons, none of them prolific. Now, they're not, like, Sancho isn't that kind of player. Rashford had a spell, Martial had a spell where they were quite potent in front of goal. Now you've got a situation where when the ball falls to one of those three lads, they're not going to score as many goals as Ronaldo, but they're probably going to create more chances without Ronaldo.
Frankie de Jong, a lot of speculation that Chelsea are going to come in and usurp Manchester United and get the deal done, that maybe Frankie de Jong might actually want to sign for Chelsea. If that's the case, I just asked Samuel about Declan Rice. That's not going to happen. United again been linked with Ruben Neves. Who will be Manchester United's midfield two by the end of this window? Well,
if it's Fred and McTominay, then it's really not a great start to the Erik ten Hag era. It's a bit underwhelming. Like, I think the players that they've brought in, I like Malacia, the left back. Actually, whenever I watched Feyenoord last season, he and Luis Sinisterra, who signed for Leeds, were their two best players. But they need a midfielder, and I know obviously Ten Hag wants Frankie de Jong. He knows him well, but if Frankie de Jong doesn't want to come to Manchester United, then you don't want players like that. Chelsea seem to be, their transfer strategy seems to be, what are they doing across the road there, or what are they doing? Well, it seems to be
led by Todd Bowley, who has come in with no outstanding knowledge of football, and as you say, is looking around going, oh well, he must be good if they're interested in him. We should get him.
But saying that, Raheem Sterling and Koulibaly are two very good signings.
Absolutely. Like, Sterling could well prove to be the signing of the summer. We're tight enough on time. Mentioned it, David Connolly, looking through all the season previews, I'm surprised by the lack of movement from an awful lot of teams outside the top six, and lack of exciting or even peculiar signings. You go, geez, this guy, if it was to work out, could change things.
Yeah.
And like Leicester are one of them who you feel are almost, and should have finished in the top four over the last couple of seasons, would be ready to kick on, but have done nothing in the transfer window, and an awful lot of their players now are been linked with moves away from the club. Would you be worried if you were a Leicester fan?
Yeah, I would be. I think when people do their previews at the start of the season, Brendan Rodgers is going to be in the conversation for who is the manager that could be the first out the door. I actually picked Rodgers I think a couple of seasons ago, and then they started off brilliantly, so I was left to look pretty foolish. It was off the back of the fact that they missed out in top 4, and then the following season they did the same again, went to the final day. But
there's a bet there that like is going to look so obvious in about a month's time, be a top scorer or first manager to go or to get relegated or top 6 or something. Maybe Rodgers is the man.
Yeah, I'd be kind of looking at someone like Marco Silva maybe, because Fulham will have expectations to hit the ground running in the Premier League, and if they don't, they'll just do what they always do. Like Fulham and Watford are very similar in that fact. But yeah, you'd be worried with Leicester. They haven't signed players. They're very good at getting big fees for players like Harry Maguire.
Well, on that then, James Maddison has been linked to Newcastle United. Phil, out of 10, how likely is this transfer?
Right now, I would say about 5. But see, we're in early August. We've a month ago. You start the season badly. Remember, the season is starting a week earlier because of the World Cup. So it just gives you more time to get deals done. And if certain teams don't start well, they'll go to their owners and say, right, you got to back me before the transfer window closes. But yeah, it's all like Leicester peaked, and they probably need to reassess things and maybe start rebuilding, and maybe they feel like Brendan Rodgers, let's see what he can do, but it wouldn't be the worst thing if it didn't work out.
Be careful what you wish for.
Colm, our producers, decided to liven things up by adding some dramatic music to the background, and it fell very flat, it's got to be said. It sort of ruined the piece almost there.
I thought we did a good show prior
to that. Aside from you just disappearing for 3 minutes, which we were just meant to ignore.
Yeah, well, but people didn't even notice until you just mentioned it there.
I'd already told them.
It actually never happened. You'd already told them.
Yeah. You said you stormed
to finish up then on the return of Deal or No Deal, Jason Knight, should he leave Derby County?
Yeah.
Yes.
League One.
Jesus.
Are we overestimating Jason Knight's ability if he hasn't left already?
No, I think he's obviously quite a grounded young footballer that would have a sense of loyalty to Derby. I don't think he's the kind of player that's going to go knocking on the door saying, I want to leave. But I'd say there will be inquiries for him, and then it's a case of sitting down with them saying, right, I think maybe it's time I leave. And whether that's high-end Championship or a Premier League club, who knows?
Let's see how
he's certainly he's so talented.
I agree totally.
He really stands out anytime he plays for Ireland. That ability to be able to take a ball in tight spaces, but he's 2-footed. I love the way he dribbles with his left foot at times as well. And
let's see how his former teammate Festio Basile, who I think is a terrific talent, gets on. James Abankwa, Carl Heffernan, and Kerrigan all in Italy this season, which is
Aaron Connolly. We probably
Aaron Connolly, sorry, yeah,
and obviously
should send
one of us over to Italy.
Yeah,
just saying,
one of
I'll
us,
do it.
namely who? I love Italy. I may have to go there for a wedding in October, so maybe get it all.
While you're there, Johnny, do a bit of work.
Pieces there for you.
Do a bit of work. That's more or less what's done. Unless there's any more Kilmacud transfer news you want to get into, Deal or No Deal.
No.
Anyone else going after Clifford? Paddy even?
That's it. The Clifford brothers are signing. Yeah.
All right. That was the return of Deal or No Deal.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it. What have I done? Like I walked into a circus. It's amazing, isn't it?
Whatever happened to those guys, eh? Whatever happened to those guys. OTBAM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We're back tomorrow morning, 7:30. Owen Sheehan is going to be joined by Dan McDonald in studio.
Yeah,
B-team
it's supposed to be today, but we did a swap to, as ever, I facilitated him. He's at a press conference or something, so I was supposed to be tomorrow. So instead I'll have a lie-in until
great, delighted for you. We'll have the second episode of our brand new series.
Yeah, sorry, should
had
mention
to be there.
Very briefly, yes, Steve Doyle is doing a DJ set tonight in town, so my getting up tomorrow morning early or not may depend on whether I go along in the Big Romance in town. Yeah, go along see Steve do mix a few beats in the town.
Since Mauro Piccata at Talca Park, this is
I don't think they're related, to be fair.
No,
but that was a great night. I definitely came out of Talca Park that night thinking every League of Ireland game should be followed by a DJ set in the bar, because it'd just maximise revenue and everyone would forget about the football.
Okay, we're leaving you right now with football journalist Jonathan Wilson speaking ahead of the new Premier League season. Enjoy. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
I said once again, lives will be ruled by kickoff times.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, the respite of the summer is coming to an end, and yeah, it's been very noticeable this week how my workload has already gone through the roof.
So we'll be talking to you, by the way, in the next couple of weeks. I started Two Brothers about Jack and Bobby Charlton, your new book, and I have to say, first few pages did not make me want to work in a mine, I'll say that much. So I'm looking forward to chatting to you about the book. I mean, it's fascinating subjects, and when they're brothers, and the architecture around them should be a really, really great read. So I'm looking forward to that. So in the meantime, let's talk Premier League. We might start with Man City. The two thoroughbreds being Man City and Liverpool in this title race. Man City are at an interesting precipice in many ways. They are looking to win a 5th title in 6 years, and that would really consign these years to era of total dominance, despite Liverpool's valiant efforts to keep pace.
Yeah, it would. I mean, it's only happened once before in English history that a team has won 5 out of 6, which was Manchester United around the turn of the millennium. And I think the irony of that is that it's not really what City are targeting. They really want to win the Champions League, and the league sort of seems to come along each season almost as a consolation now that they have this series of traumatic defeats in the Champions League, and I'm pretty sure that's the reason why they've taken what I think is a fairly substantial gamble with their forward line, changing how they play. And I think we did wonder whether Haaland would be a great fit for them. He's obviously a brilliant forward. They're obviously a brilliant team. Do the two go together? Well, what we saw on Saturday has only magnified those doubts. So perhaps this season there is an opportunity for others there.
I didn't see the game on Saturday, and I'll watch it back at some stage this week, but I've been really struck by the number of observers who did watch the game talking about the Haaland relationship with the rest of his team. To read from your piece, for instance, over the weekend on the Guardian website, Haaland seemed to be playing a different game to his teammates. Again and again, he set off on surges behind the Liverpool back four, and again, they went sideways, reluctant to risk possession. That sounds like a pretty frustrating afternoon.
Yeah, and I think in the immediate aftermath, there was a lot of criticism of him, and he didn't look quite as fit as maybe you'd hope he would be, which I guess is maybe to do with his pre-season. He missed those two very good chances. The one in the last minute when the game was already over, when he hit the bar from 6-7 yards. I think that's probably less worrying than that seeming total disconnect with the midfield. And it was a very odd game to watch, because again and again you saw the ball come to De Bruyne particularly, who seems like such a switched-on, intelligent player, who's so central to how City play, and you think just a simple forward pass. And Haaland's in. He's found space between Matip and Van Dijk. He's got the run on them, and he did have a great physical battle with Van Dijk and didn't always come out on top in that. But he was making those runs, and the ball wasn't being played. Now, I guess to an extent that's why he's been bought. That there's a sense perhaps that in the very, very biggest games against the very, very best opposition, City maybe aren't quite as ruthless as they ought to be. I mean, they've been the top scorer for each of the last 5 seasons. So they don't have a problem scoring goals in the Premier League. But the fact they keep slipping up in these big European games, I presume the logic of bringing him in and offloading Sterling and Jesus is to try and just make them, I don't want to say predictable, but just to break up those patterns that I think in big games, very, very good opponents can sort of feel, we know what they're doing, that's okay. Whereas Haaland would give them that extra option. But as yet, that isn't gelling. I always sort of think that the very best teams, the most interesting teams, are those where there is a little bit of friction. The friction sort of makes them more creative. It gives them extra stimulus. And maybe everything's been a little bit too well lubricated for City. But in introducing that friction, it is obviously a gamble, and the evidence of Saturday is that it's a pretty big gamble.
And Jonathan, did Haaland's body language speak of a man frustrated with the continual ignoring of his runs?
Well, I mean, it did, but I think that's natural. I think naturally when you've made that run, you turn to whoever could have played that pass, and you sort of look at him and you shrug and you sort of say, "Come on, you could have released me there." But I think it is a difficult transition for City to make, because they're so used to trying to control games through possession. And you never saw that Guardiola line even, I mean, it was back in his Barcelona days, he said it, but I think it remains true that he thinks it takes 15 passes to set up the play as he wants it set up. Yeah, he's somebody who's instinctively cautious about very rapid counterattacks and transition and introducing an element of chaos to the game, which Klopp clearly is very happy to do. In fact, yeah, he tries to create the chaos, and I think it will take a change on their part. And the time when Guardiola has tried to do that before was bring Ibrahimovic to Barcelona in 2009. Ibrahimovic, a player that Haaland consciously has modelled himself on, who shares certain characteristics in terms of their size, their capacity to physically overpower opponents, and that didn't work out. And again, it's pre-season. We're desperately looking for clues to what's going to happen. But there was that very strange thing on Twitter last week. I don't know if you saw it, of Haaland going into Marks and Spencer and saying, "What am I going to buy?" Then a few minutes later, there's a photograph of him buying some Percy pigs. Now, maybe that's just sort of, he's bought some sweets, so what? But it felt slightly pointed, as if he's sort of rebelling against the very controlling culture of City that monitors diet and body fat and everything else.
It did, well, because he put in brackets at the end, "Don't tell anyone."
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the tone of it was very much, look at me being naughty, look at me rebelling. I mean, if that is the sum of his rebellion, who cares?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's. I think it's that's one of those things that in 3 months we'll either forgotten all about it, or we'll be going back. Oh, look, the signs were there, and it's hard to tell it at this point.
I mean, it's hard to imagine in 2-3 months' time that De Bruyne and Haaland haven't struck up a fairly outrageous relationship. And I'd almost, if you were to say to me now, well, you can choose to guess that De Bruyne will set Haaland up for 10 goals, over or under, with first-time passes more than 15, 20 metres, I'd be inclined to say probably over, because De Bruyne will start to realise, I mean, anyone who's watched a compilation of Haaland goals, one of his many gifts, but certainly one of them, is an ability to make these incredible runs that actually just seem to make a midfielder's life very, very easy. He has this innate ability to pick the right line and the right angle and the right speed, and it's like, well, just give it to me and I'll stick it in the net. So it's really hard to imagine De Bruyne ignoring those runs for very long, unless the express wishes of his manager are to ignore those runs, in which case it's a very strange signing.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of that is true. The one thing I would slightly caveat that with is they won't play many teams who play as high against them as Liverpool do and leave that space for him to run into. And I think that was the bigger question I had about him. And that was why I thought, he's been signed for big games. But when they play against, who's a good example of this? A team who sits very, very deep against them. I mean, Manchester United, the way they were at the beginning of 2 seasons ago, when Solskjaer was sort of threatening to actually do something that side before Ronaldo arrived and messed everything up. But a team that sits very, very deep against them, where there's no space for Haaland to run into, you're then looking at him saying, well, what does he actually bring? Because for his size, he's not that good in the air. And anyway, City's game is absolutely not to just fling crosses in. And maybe, it's useful for them to have that option. I think the game away against PSG in the group stage of Champions League last season, City had loads of ball, sort of, 30 yards to 50 yards from a PSG goal. PSG sat really deep, and you just sort of thought, just sling it across. And then you sort of think, no, actually, slinging it across to Phil Foden maybe isn't the right thing to do, or Raheem Sterling ended up playing centre forward. Whereas Haaland, you do have that option. But, he's not Niall Quinn. He's not somebody who you would back to beat the vast majority of centre-backs the majority of times. He's good in the air, but not brilliant in the air. And anyway, as I say, I think that's really not City's game. I think the value he adds is those runs, but I think those will only really occur either against teams who are chasing the game because they're behind, or because they're better sides and they do push out.
Yeah, I guess the other goal he's quite adept at is ball pulled back to him and finishes, and he'll score plenty of them, so that'll work. A last one on Haaland before.
That was the goal he scored against Bayern. For 12 minutes into his debut in the friendly, and I think it's significant it was Grealish who set that up, because Grealish is the other one who sort of last season, you thought, you know, he's got that slightly anarchic presence to him, that anarchic personality, which can add something to City that they perhaps don't have. But he seemed to, I mean, that interview he gave on the final day of last season, I thought was incredibly revealing, despite Micah Richards' attempts to derail it. Talking about how he felt very anxious and was always second guessing himself. But if he and Haaland can strike up a partnership, then I think that could be. I mean, it's both very dangerous for Guardiola because they are, slightly anarchic, but it's potentially very exciting for City.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can't believe I didn't rush to check if Jack Grealish retweeted the Percy Pig tweet of Haaland because that would be very worrying indeed for Guardiola.
Well, I think there are questions about Grealish's commitment to the absolutely rigorous diet regime of City. I mean, I'm not saying he's damaging himself, but I think he perhaps finds it difficult to stick to the absolute letter of the diet.
So the one last point I wanted to make about Haaland, or ask your thoughts on. Oh yes, to what extent will a Guardiola team require Haaland, do you think, to be involved in build-up play, to come short and take a touch and move it on and rotate and come back and be in general circulation and available for the ball at all times? Or can he almost stand there Niall Quinn-esque with his hands on his hips for a little while?
I mean, I'd be amazed if Guardiola let him do that. I think he will have to involve himself. He will have to pull wide. He will have to drop deep. I guess the one thing you'd say is even by standing there, he manipulates the opposition because you will be reluctant to push up against him. And that maybe just creates a little bit more space for City's midfield. So I think there is a semi-argument that by not moving, he creates problems for opponents and creates space. But I think there will have to be some movement there. And that is an aspect of his game that he will have to improve and he will have to learn. And certainly, he'll be expected to press and close down passing lanes and close down opposition centre-backs when they have the ball.
Jonathan, from Liverpool's perspective, if this year is the chance for City to go 5-6 and really cement their dominance, for Liverpool, again, it has that defining feel because instead of 5-6, 4-2 feels much more a reflection, I think, of this very competitive rivalry that we've enjoyed. So it is a really important season for Klopp and this Liverpool side and how we remember them, even if that's a touch reductive, just to go on the numbers. So Mane's gone, Núñez is in, and pre-season woes behind him, exaggerated, I'm sure, and he celebrated accordingly. And there's just a real sense Liverpool are locked in, ready to go again, and it'll be City-Liverpool all the way. Is there anything about Liverpool this summer to cause you great concern that they won't be there or thereabouts?
No, not great concern. I think the one question that sort of cropped up about them last season, I guess it's two related questions. So one was, I think, against the very best side. So if you look at their 6 games against the other 3 teams qualified for Champions League, so City, Chelsea and Tottenham, they drew all of those in the league. They played Chelsea twice in cup finals, drew both those and won on penalties. And then, if you're really looking to make the point, you could say the Real Madrid, the Champions League final. Yeah, they perhaps, against the very best sides, lack a little bit of guile. And I think that's why Klopp was so keen for Thiago to play in that final, despite fairly evidently not being fully fit. So that's the one slight issue. And that has not been resolved. But I think that was magnified by Salah's loss of form in the latter half of the season. And I guess that could have been fatigue, because he played at the Cup of Nations, and obviously the fact that Egypt lost in the final of that, then he had the World Cup playoff when Egypt lost to Senegal, as they had done in the Cup of Nations final. You can see that there's a very clear external factor there that might be leading him to sort of just be slightly off colour and slightly fatigued. I also wonder whether the arrival of Diaz and Mane moving into the middle just slightly affected the dynamic of that front three. So he wasn't quite getting the service that he would get from peak Firmino or even from Jota. So I wonder whether, if he can strike up I don't want to say a better relationship, because that implies a criticism of Mane, which I don't really mean, but a relationship with Núñez which is more profitable for him, that could give Liverpool that little bit of guile that maybe they did just lack post-Christmas last season. Yeah, no, I mean, that's a very fair point. And the Spurs game at home in particular, where it really felt from quite a distance out in that game like they had
run out of ideas and they weren't going to break Spurs down definitely jumps to mind. And Madrid, for sure, at a certain point in that game, again, not a million, you know, a fair distance from the full-time whistle, you got a real sense they weren't going to break Madrid down. That was definitely there. And yet the other side of that coin is, you think of the chances they did create against Madrid, for instance, and if they had just taken one of them, it's a different proposition. And we are talking about the finest of fine margins.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you'd say, I mean, you know, those 6 league games, I think 4 of them were 2-2 and 2 of them 1-1. So they scored 10 goals in those 6 games, which, yeah, you'd think would be enough to win 2 or 3 of them. The set against that, the Madrid game, the 2 finals against Chelsea, so 2-0 nils and a 1-0 defeat. But you know, all of those games they did create chances, they just didn't take them. And that again maybe is reflective of Salah being slightly off colour. And of course for most teams the World Cup coming in November, December is likely to wear their players out more. Well, Liverpool, the fact that Salah's not going to be at the World Cup is beneficial to them.
Yeah.
He can have a month off and he can come back fully refreshed. But the exact opposite of last season when he was coming the second half of the season with a bit of fatigue.
One point on the 2 managers. So Klopp signed a contract extension. Guardiola's future is less clear. Do they both look to you as full of energy and enthusiasm and ready for road? Because traditionally, you know, well, I guess Guardiola has taken his sabbaticals from time to time, and Klopp, you feel, is an emotional type who needs to be fully invested in the project, and he looks to be at the moment. But your sense of kind of the energy levels and enthusiasm of Klopp and Guardiola this year?
Yeah, and I think it was definitely a danger towards. Yeah, after that Champions League final, you did wonder about Klopp. But then, to be honest, even by that parade they had, he seemed to have his life back. And that's understandable. The disappointment of having come so close to winning 4, and even, I think particularly the way that final day of the league season went, that they got much closer than I have to say I thought was ever likely. I just assumed City would cruise to victory over Villa and it wouldn't be an issue. But the fact it was almost within their grasp, I think to have that and then Champions League final within the space of a week, I think inevitably that sort of wears you down a bit. But yeah, the energy seemed to have come back by the parade, and yeah, last season was a brilliant season, and yeah, from the evidence of the Community Shield, he seemed fully energised, and why wouldn't he be? Because Liverpool played extremely well. Guardiola, I think he's much harder to read. There's always that slight tetchiness about him. I think, I don't know how much difference it makes that he brought in Juan Malillo, who had been his great mentor at the end of his playing career, and the beginning of his managerial career. Had him there as assistant. He's now left, and they brought in Maresca, the former West Brom midfielder. I don't know if that's significant or not, but I guess if you've got that sort of elder statesman figure there who you absolutely trust, that's a protection that maybe isn't there anymore. So I don't know. He's somebody. I mean, both of them give so much of themselves.
Yeah.
That you feel with both of them, they're both pretty close to breaking all the time. But Klopp's been at Liverpool for this is his 8th season, is it now?
Yeah. So he's never done a stint like this. I forgot about the parade. I mean, that was just the most insane thing. These parades are not meant to be joyous affairs, and he does have a magic touch. He did seem to turn the thing into this life-affirming, we're all in this together, we're a great team, this is to be enjoyed kind of moment, as opposed to slumped at the front of the bus. It's an amazing quality.
I think that's right. I mean, they won 2 domestic cups. They got to a Champions League final, and they came within sort of 20 minutes and 2 goals of winning the league. And that's a great season. If you don't celebrate that, then you're not going to celebrate very much in life. So I think he got the... I was sort of very sceptical about it. And I'm a sort of a generally sort of parade sceptic. But I remember when Sunderland lost in the 92 Cup final, even though the parade literally went 200 yards from my door, I didn't bother to go and see it because I sort of thought, no, we've lost. But when I actually saw the Liverpool parade and you sort of saw the mood of the players, saw the mood of the fans, I thought, yeah, this is a good and necessary thing. And in terms of pressing the reset button, and sort of saying to people, don't be disappointed. This was a brilliant season. We came really, really close. It's the right thing to do. and I think he probably needed that, and I think the players probably needed that, and I think the fans needed it, and what that did was to clear the hangover immediately.
Yeah,
and it was a bit. I feel like I'm talking about Niall Quinn a lot now, but it was a bit similar to after Sunderland had lost on penalties in the playoff final in '98 after that 4-4 draw against Charlton, and Niall Quinn's post-match interview was immediately, "Forget this. We know we're the best team in this division. Let's win it next season." And that you sort of felt lifted the mood. And I think this was a similar process of kind of making sure that the defeat didn't become something that dragged the team down and the fans down in the longer term.
But Jordan Henderson at the time said it was one of the greatest days of his life. The parade. He's had a lot of good days. This is the genius of Klopp. You're now 2 Niall Quinn mentions and 2 Sunderland mentions into this conversation. The only real debate here, the side bet is who's going to come out on top there, Sunderland or Quinn, and remains to be seen. So who comes out on top between Liverpool and Man City this season, Jonathan, is the burning question.
I think probably City, but maybe 55-45. And underlying all these discussions is City are much, much richer. And that's important, not just in the players they can afford and the facilities, but they've been able to afford Guardiola, who's one of the greatest coaches of all time, as Klopp is. But it's an incredible achievement of Liverpool just to keep this close. With they spent something like £400 million less in transfer fees net over the last 6 seasons. So to just to stay on their coattails and to be a regular challenger and to have in terms of head-to-head record between Klopp and Guardiola, Klopp's is better. Which nobody else can say over any period of time. So, I'd be surprised if City ran away with it. And I think there's a potential that the World Cup could blow City up, and the Holland situation could blow City up. But I think they are still just about favourites.
Yeah, okay. I think that is the general sense. All right. It is going to be fascinating to see what a World Cup in the middle of a season does. In some ways, it should have been the first question I asked you, because it's just such an unprecedented aspect to this season. And what are your overarching thoughts on it? Will it just be a case of recovery and fitness, or I guess emotion comes into the whole thing as well, and who goes deep in a World Cup and who doesn't, and who wins and who has heartbreak, and all of these intangibles and injuries will happen, and it's hard to know what bearing it's going to have, I think, until we see the bearing that it has. It'll be quite specific and unpredictable, I think, the impact that the World Cup has.
Yeah, I think that's true, and it's not just as coming in the middle of a season. It's that we've never had a major tournament coming. I think it's 8 days between the final Premier League game and the first game of the World Cup. So that's going to have an impact on the World Cup as well. How can you prepare? So I think that first round of group games at the World Cup. Actually, you saw that at the Cup of Nations. First round of group games at the Cup of Nations were pretty universally dire. There was barely any goals scored, and a couple of quite weird results. And I think you could see that at the World Cup. And then equally coming back, the World Cup final is it December the 19th, a week before Christmas?
Yeah.
And we're back playing on Boxing Day. And so those Christmas fixtures are already a sort of gruelling test. I know that you haven't got that game between Boxing Day and New Year, but still, I think those Boxing Day fixtures, there could be some very weird stuff happens there. Or it may be that every manager just shuts things down and you get a series of really boring games.
Remains to be seen.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.